The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of destiny and power. But what happens when something arrives that operates on pure malice and strength? Something that recognizes no mystical energy, no ancient prophecy, only the cold mathematics of domination? The volcanic world of Mustafar had known violence. Lava rivers carved trenches through obsidian plains where Jedi and Sith had battled, where Anakin Skywalker had burned and been reborn as Darth Vader. The planet remembered suffering in its molten core, but it had never seen anything like the ship that tore through its ash-choked atmosphere on a Tuesday afternoon in the third year of the Empire's reign. No hyperspace signature preceded it, no Imperial codes transmitted from its hull. The vessel simply appeared in Mustafar's orbit as if reality had hiccuped, then plummeted toward the mining outpost like a meteor wrapped in purple-white energy. Mining supervisors watched their sensor screens flicker and die. The ship, sleek, organic, utterly alien in design, crashed into the volcanic plains 3 kilometers from the primary facility, throwing lava geysers 100 meters high. Stormtroopers mobilized within minutes. TIE fighters screamed overhead, circling the crash site where the strange vessel sat half-buried in cooling magma. It looked like no ship in Imperial records. Smooth curves, no visible weapons, a design that suggested biological growth rather than engineering. The hull was pristine despite the impact, its surface reflecting the lava's orange glow with an almost contemptuous sheen. "Scan for life signs," the garrison commander ordered, his voice tight with the nervousness of a man who knew unusual reports reached Vader's attention quickly. Mustafar was the Dark Lord's personal domain, his fortress of Bog Kar standing sentinel on the northern continent. Unexplained arrivals were discouraged. The scanning tech's hands trembled over his instruments. "Sir, I'm reading one life form. Humanoid configuration. Power signature is—" He paused, recalibrating. "Sir, the readings don't make sense. It's like the being is generating its own energy field, more power than a capital ship reactor." Before the commander could respond, the ship's hull split open like a flowering plant. No hiss of pressurization, no mechanical whir. The metal simply peeled back as if obeying an unspoken command. A figure emerged, hovering above the lava without aid of repulsors or visible technology. He was small, barely over a meter tall, with chalk-white skin that gleamed like polished bone in the volcanic light. Purple and pink bioarmor covered his body, not clothing, but what appeared to be a natural exoskeleton. A long tail swished behind him with casual menace, but it was his eyes that made the commander's breath catch. Blood red with black pupils, reflecting an intelligence that was ancient, cruel, and utterly indifferent to the 24 blaster rifles now trained upon him. Frieza, Emperor of Universe 7, Lord of the Planet Trade Organization, surveyed his surroundings with the mild interest one might show an insect colony. The air tasted wrong, thick with some pervasive energy he couldn't quite identify. His Kai felt sluggish, perhaps 15% less responsive than normal, annoying but hardly debilitating for someone of his caliber. "How primitive," he said, his voice a refined purr that somehow carried across the volcanic plain despite the wind and distance. He spoke in his native tongue, yet every stormtrooper understood him perfectly, some property of this galaxy translating his words. "Tell me, where has that dimensional anomaly deposited me? And do try to make your answer amusing. I've had a very tedious journey." "Identify yourself," the commander shouted, trying to project authority he didn't feel. "You are in restricted Imperial space. By order of—" Frieza raised one finger. The commander exploded. Not burned, not shot. Simply came apart in a fine red mist as an invisible force crushed him into constituent atoms. 23 stormtroopers opened fire simultaneously, blue blaster bolts converging on the hovering figure. Frieza didn't move. The bolts struck an invisible barrier inches from his skin, dissipating harmlessly like rain on a force field, though no technology generated the shield. He was simply too durable, his body's natural energy too dense for such crude weapons to penetrate. "Disappointing," he sighed. With a casual wave, purple energy beams lanced from his fingertips. Death beams, precise and instant. Each beam found a stormtrooper's heart, drilling through plastoid armor as if it were paper. Bodies dropped in perfect synchronization, smoke curling from cauterized wounds. The TIE fighters dove, laser cannons blazing. Frieza glanced upward with the expression of a man noticing a gnat. He extended his hand, and telekinetic force, not the force but raw key manipulation, seized both fighters mid-flight. The pilots screamed as their cockpits compressed, metal shrieking. Frieza clenched his fist. The TIE fighters crumpled into spheres of twisted metal and crystallized transparent steel, then dropped like stones into the lava below. Silence reclaimed Mustafar, broken only by the crackling of cooling bodies and the eternal rumble of volcanic activity. "Now then," Frieza said pleasantly, floating toward the mining facility where terrified workers watched from reinforced viewports. "Let's try this again. I am Lord Frieza, and I find myself unexpectedly displaced. You will explain to me the nature of this galaxy, its power structures, and most importantly," his smile widened, revealing needle-sharp teeth, "who I should speak to about establishing new management." Inside the facility, a communications officer's hands shook as he activated the priority channel to Vader's fortress. The message was simple, desperate, and within the hour would set in motion a collision between Empire and Emperor that the galaxy could scarcely imagine. On Coruscant, in the Emperor's throne room, Palpatine's eyes snapped open. Through the Force, he had felt it. Not the deaths of stormtroopers, those happened constantly, but something else. A presence that didn't register as living in the Force, yet radiated power that made even his ancient senses recoil. A blank space where a supernova should be. The Emperor smiled into the darkness. How delightful. A new piece had appeared on the board. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. On Mustafar, Frieza examined a datapad he'd taken from one of the corpses, his eyes scanning through Imperial databases with the quick comprehension of someone who'd conquered thousands of worlds. Galactic Empire, Rebellion, the Force, Jedi, Sith. How quaint. This galaxy had its own hierarchies of power, its own delusions of destiny. He would enjoy teaching them the truth, that destiny bowed before strength, and strength answered only to Lord Frieza. The Imperial Star Destroyer Devastator arrived in Mustafar's orbit 14 hours after the incident. From its command bridge, Admiral Ven watched the tactical readouts with growing unease. The mining facility had gone silent. Automated distress beacons painted a picture of catastrophic loss. 47 personnel dead, all defensive emplacements offline, and the perpetrator still present at the crash site. "Lord Vader arrives within the hour," his communications officer reported. "He demands a full briefing upon—" "Belay that!" The voice cut through the bridge like a vibroblade through flesh. Every officer snapped to attention as the Dark Lord of the Sith strode onto the command deck, his cape billowing behind him with theatrical menace. The mechanical breathing that preceded him had already sent 3 junior officers scrambling from his path. Vader moved to the forward viewport, his helmeted gaze fixing on the volcanic world below. Through the Force, he had sensed the disturbance, a void in the cosmic tapestry, something that existed outside the natural order. It intrigued him. More than that, it challenged him, and Vader had destroyed far more dangerous things than mysterious arrivals. "Show me the surveillance footage," he commanded. The hollow projector flickered to life, displaying the slaughter on Mustafar's surface. Vader watched without comment as the small, pale figure dispatched stormtroopers and TIE fighters with contemptuous ease. The being's movements were economical, almost lazy. No lightsaber, no blaster, no visible technology, just raw destructive power emanating from biological sources. "Energy analysis?" Vader asked. "Inconclusive, my lord," the sensor officer reported nervously. "The entity generates power readings consistent with a Class 3 reactor, but it's biological in nature. It doesn't register in the Force. We can detect its physical presence, but it's as if the Force flows around it rather than through it." Vader's respirator cycled twice, processing this information. A being powerful enough to massacre Imperial forces, yet invisible to Force senses? Impossible. Everything living touched the Force. Everything could be manipulated, dominated, destroyed through its power. "Prepare my shuttle," Vader ordered. "I will confront this creature personally." "My lord," Admiral Venn ventured carefully, "perhaps we should simply bombard the site from orbit. Tactical assessment suggests—" Vader's hand twitched. Venn's words cut off as invisible fingers closed around his throat. The Admiral clawed at his neck, feet lifting inches from the deck as Vader's power suspended him. "I do not require tactical assessments from cowards," Vader said quietly. "I require obedience." He released Venn, who collapsed gasping. "Prepare my shuttle." "Yes, my lord." On Mustafar's surface, Frieza had made himself comfortable in the mining facility's command center. Bodies had been unceremoniously dumped outside. He found corpses aesthetically displeasing, and he'd spent the intervening hours educating himself about this peculiar galaxy. The databanks were surprisingly comprehensive. The Galactic Empire, approximately 1.5 million inhabited systems, ruled by an emperor named Palpatine through military force and something called the Force. Frieza found the concept amusing, a mystical energy field that granted telekinesis, precognition, and other abilities. It sounded like a primitive understanding of Kai, dressed up in religious nonsense. The Emperor himself was more interesting. Records showed an elderly human who'd somehow orchestrated the collapse of a thousand-year-old republic and nearly exterminated an order of warrior monks called Jedi. The man had vision, Frieza conceded. Ruthless consolidation of power, elimination of rivals, ruling through fear. These were principles Frieza understood intimately. The Enforcer, this Darth Vader, seemed equally competent. A cyborg who hunted down surviving Jedi with mechanical efficiency, commanding through terror and absolute loyalty to his master. Frieza had employed similar lieutenants in his own organization. Zarbon and Dodoria came to mind, though they'd proven ultimately disappointing. Lord Frieza, one of the surviving technicians, ventured from the doorway, trembling. Frieza had allowed 5 personnel to live, finding their terrified compliance useful for operating the facility's systems. There's a ship approaching, Imperial shuttle, and the sensors are detecting... Detecting what? Frieza asked without looking up from the datapad. It's him, my lord. Darth Vader. He's coming here. Frieza's tail swished with interest. Is that so? How thoughtful. I was beginning to wonder when someone important would arrive. He set down the datapad and floated upward, passing through the facility's blast doors with the technicians scrambling to open them ahead of his progress. The Lambda-class shuttle descended through Mustafar's perpetual ash clouds, landing 200 meters from the facility. Its boarding ramp lowered with hydraulic precision, and Darth Vader emerged flanked by 6 stormtroopers, though these were different from the garrison troops. Their armor bore red markings, and they moved with the discipline of elite veterans. Frieza hovered above the lava field, arms crossed, studying the approaching cyborg with genuine curiosity. Vader was taller than expected, over 2 meters of black armor and mechanical menace. The breathing apparatus created in rhythm that seemed designed to unsettle opponents. The flowing cape was pure theater, Frieza noted approvingly. He understood the value of presentation. They stopped 10 meters apart, Predator evaluating Predator. You are trespassing in Imperial space, Vader stated, his voice a mechanical rumble. You have murdered Imperial personnel and destroyed Imperial property. Surrender, and your death will be swift. Frieza laughed, a sound like crystal chimes mixed with distant screams. How delightfully presumptuous. Tell me, are you the one they call Vader? I've been reading about you. Quite the reputation for brutality and efficiency. I can respect that. His smile widened. But I'm afraid I don't surrender, Lord Vader. I accept surrender. There's a significant difference. Vader's hand moved toward his lightsaber. Through the Force, he reached out, attempting to seize the creature's throat as he had done to countless opponents. The Force obeyed his will, invisible fingers closing, and met resistance like trying to crush a Durasteel pillar with bare hands. Frieza didn't even flinch. The Force grip that could shatter windpipes and crack spines simply failed to find purchase. It was like gripping smoke. if smoke were made of condensed starlight. What? Vader's surprise lasted only a fraction of a second before his lightsaber ignited, crimson blade humming to life. Frieza's eyes gleamed with recognition. Ah, a plasma blade. Elegant. Primitive, but elegant. He extended one finger, and from its tip emerged a thin beam of purple energy, a death beam concentrated to the width of a lightsaber. It crackled with barely contained power. I prefer something with more versatility, personally. The six stormtroopers opened fire. Frieza's free hand waved dismissively, and telekinetic force sent all 24 blaster bolts careening wildly off target. One struck a stormtrooper in the shoulder, spinning him around. Another melted through a cooling tower behind Vader. Disappointing, Frieza sighed. Your soldiers are even weaker than I thought. But you... He focused on Vader, and for the first time the Dark Lord felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine uncertainty. You might actually provide some entertainment. Vader launched himself forward with force-enhanced speed, lightsaber arcing toward Frieza's neck in a killing strike perfected through decades of combat. The blade moved faster than normal humans could perceive, backed by the strength of cybernetic limbs and Sith fury. Frieza caught the lightsaber blade between two fingers. The plasma edge screamed against his fingertips, energy sparking and crackling, but couldn't cut through. Vader's optical sensors registered impossible readings. The being's fingers were generating their own energy field, dense enough to stop a weapon that could cut through blast doors. Interesting toy, Frieza remarked. Then his tail whipped forward like a striking serpent, slamming into Vader's chest with the force of a thermal detonator. Vader flew backward, armor crumpling, systems shrieking warnings as he tumbled across the volcanic rock. He crashed through a cooling tower, durasteel buckling around his impact, and came to rest 50 meters from where he'd started. Alarms blared in his helmet. 3 ribs cracked, chest plate compromised, respiratory system compensating for trauma. He rose to his feet, armor smoking, and for the first time in years, Darth Vader felt a sensation he'd almost forgotten, the cold touch of potential defeat. Frieza hovered in place, examining his fingertips where they'd contacted the lightsaber. Faint scorch marks. You can hurt me, he said with genuine pleasure. How delightful. This galaxy might prove entertaining after all. Vader circled slowly, his mechanical breathing the only sound besides the rumble of lava flows. The stormtroopers had retreated to the shuttle, wise given what they'd witnessed. This creature had stopped a lightsaber with its bare fingers and sent him flying with a casual strike. In all his years serving the Emperor, hunting Jedi, crushing rebellions across 100 worlds, Vader had never encountered anything quite like this. Through the Force, he reached deeper, pulling on reserves of dark side power that had toppled AT-ATs and torn Star Destroyers apart. Boulders of volcanic rock ripped free from the ground, dozens of them, each massing several tons. With a gesture, Vader hurled the entire barrage at Frieza with crushing velocity. Frieza's expression never changed. He raised one hand, palm open, and the boulders simply stopped in midair, suspended by invisible force. Not the Force. Vader could sense the difference now. This was something else entirely, raw power that operated on different principles than the mystical energy he commanded. Telekinesis? Frieza said with mild interest. How quaint. Let me show you a more refined application. He clenched his fist. The boulders exploded simultaneously, reduced to dust and pebbles that rained across the battlefield. Then Frieza moved, and Vader's cybernetic enhancements barely registered the motion before the creature was there, fists driving into his midsection with force that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. Vader's world became pain and klaxons. He flew again, this time crashing into the side of the mining facility hard enough to leave a crater in the reinforced durasteel walls. His armor systems screamed failure warnings. Internal bleeding detected. Spinal support compromised. Respiratory function at 60%. He pulled himself from the wreckage, one hand extended. Lightning, pure Sith lightning, blue, white, and terrible, arced from his fingertips toward Frieza. The electricity was born of hatred, of suffering compressed into deadly energy, capable of shorting out technology and boiling flesh. Frieza took the lightning directly to his chest, It crawled across his bio-armor like serpents of light, crackling and spitting. He looked down at it with the expression of someone who'd discovered a mildly interesting insect. "Now that tickles," he said. "Is this your mystical force?" I was expecting something more impressive. He began walking forward through the lightning, each step deliberate, unhurried. "In my universe, I've survived energy attacks that could vaporize planets. I've bathed in the heart of dying stars. Your little electric trick is, well, let's call it quaint." Vader poured more power into the attack, drawing on every ounce of dark side energy he could channel. The lightning intensified, turning from blue-white to purple-black, reality itself seeming to warp around the concentrated hatred. The ground beneath Frieza began to melt. Frieza sighed. "I suppose I should respond in kind." He raised one finger, and a tiny sphere of purple energy formed at its tip, no larger than a marble, but radiating power that made the air shimmer. "This is a death ball, considerably smaller than my usual planetary destruction techniques, but I suspect it will suffice." He flicked it forward almost casually. Vader threw himself aside with force-enhanced speed, but the death ball wasn't aimed at him. It struck the ground where he'd been standing and detonated, releasing energy equivalent to a proton bomb. The explosion carved a crater 50 meters wide into Mustafar's surface, throwing lava geysers 300 meters into the air. The shockwave slammed into Vader mid-leap, sending him tumbling across the scorched plain like debris in a hurricane. When the smoke cleared, Vader lay motionless among the cooling rock. His armor was cracked in a dozen places, one arm bent at an unnatural angle, his cape reduced to smoldering tatters. Through fading consciousness, he reached out through the force toward the Devastator in orbit, sending a single command: "Inform the Emperor." Frieza floated down to where Vader lay, studying the broken cyborg with genuine interest. "You're quite durable. Most beings would have died from that first strike." He crouched down, tail swishing thoughtfully. "Tell me, Lord Vader, and I use that title respectfully, as one conqueror to another, who is truly in command of this empire? These records mention an Emperor Palpatine, but I sense there's more to your relationship than simple master and servant." Vader's vocabulary crackled, struggling to function through damaged systems. "You know nothing of power." "On the contrary," Frieza said pleasantly, "I know everything about power. I was born with more of it than most beings acquire in lifetimes. I've ruled an empire spanning thousands of worlds since I was a child. I've destroyed species, obliterated civilizations, and done it all with the casual ease of someone swatting flies." He leaned closer. "But I'm not unreasonable. I recognize competence when I see it. You're damaged goods, clearly. That suit reeks of desperation and life support, but you have potential. The Emperor will destroy you." Frieza laughed again, that crystalline sound that somehow conveyed both amusement and infinite cruelty. "I look forward to meeting him. In fact," he stood, looking up at the ash-choked sky where the Devastator hung in orbit. "I think it's time I introduced myself properly to this galaxy's hierarchy. Consider yourself fortunate, Lord Vader. You'll survive to witness the beginning of a new era." He gathered energy around himself, a purple-white aura that blazed brighter than the lava flows. Then he shot upward like a missile, leaving a sonic boom in his wake that shattered every remaining window in the mining facility. Within seconds, he'd breached Mustafar's atmosphere. Aboard the Devastator, Admiral Ven watched his sensors with mounting horror as the energy signature they'd been tracking rocketed toward them at impossible speeds. "Raise shields! All weapons, to—" Frieza punched through the Star Destroyer's bridge viewport. The explosive decompression lasted only a second before emergency bulkheads slammed into place, but that second was enough. Admiral Ven and 3 officers were sucked into the void, their screams lost in vacuum. Frieza hovered in the sealed corridor beyond, brushing transper steel fragments from his shoulder. "Now then," he said to the dozen stormtroopers who'd rushed to the scene, their blasters raised with admirable discipline if questionable intelligence. "I believe someone here has a direct communication line to your Emperor. I'd like to arrange a meeting. I find it's always best to introduce yourself to local management before beginning operations in a new territory." The stormtroopers opened fire. Frieza's expression shifted from pleasant to annoyed. 3 seconds later, the corridor was silent, except for the sound of cooling metal and Frieza's footsteps as he made his way deeper into the ship. His Ki senses, still slightly dulled by this galaxy's strange, pervasive energy, nevertheless detected the ship's communication center. He followed the trail of terrified crew members fleeing before him until he reached the command deck's secondary station. A communications officer sat frozen at his console, hands hovering over the controls. "Excellent," Frieza said, settling into the captain's chair as if it were a throne. "Open a channel to Coruscant, Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine's personal frequency. I imagine my arrival has been noticed by now." I... I don't have authorization to... Frieza's finger twitched. A death beam punched through the console next to the officer's head, leaving a smoking hole and the acrid smell of melted circuits. "Let me rephrase," Frieza said sweetly. "Open the channel, or I'll see if this ship's life support systems are as resilient as its commander was. Spoiler, they won't be." The officer's hands flew across the controls. Within moments, the holoprojector activated and a figure materialized. Hooded, ancient, radiating an aura of power that even Frieza's dulled senses could perceive. This was different from Vader's brute force approach. This felt like concentrated malice aged for decades, refined into something approaching art. Emperor Palpatine's yellow eyes gleamed from beneath his hood. "How interesting. The disturbance on Mustafar reveals itself." Frieza smiled, inclining his head with mock respect. "Emperor Palpatine, I presume. How delightful to finally make your acquaintance. I am Lord Frieza, and I believe we have much to discuss about the future of your empire." The Emperor's expression never changed, but through the holoprojector, Frieza could sense the calculating intelligence at work. This was someone who understood power games, who'd built an empire through manipulation and ruthless efficiency. "You have attacked my forces," Palpatine said, his voice a rasp that somehow carried authority. "Killed my servants, challenged my enforcer, yet you request an audience?" "I prefer to think of it as a demonstration of credentials," Frieza replied. "In my experience, emperors respect strength. I'm simply proving I'm worthy of your time." His tail swished lazily. "Besides, I'm not interested in conquering your empire. Not yet, at least. I find myself unexpectedly displaced in your galaxy, and I'm a businessman at heart. I thought we might discuss mutually beneficial arrangements." Palpatine was silent for a long moment, those yellow eyes studying Frieza with the intensity of a vivisectionist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "You do not touch the Force. You are a void in the cosmic tapestry, yet you command power that rivals the greatest Force users." "Force?" Frieza waved dismissively. "I've read about your mystical energy field. Where I come from, we call it Ki, and we don't dress it up in religious dogma. Power is power, Emperor. The question is, how do we best utilize it?" Another long pause. Then incredibly, Palpatine smiled, a thin, terrible expression that held no warmth. "Very well, Lord Frieza. You will come to Coruscant. We shall discuss your credentials. But know this," the smile widened. "I have destroyed beings far more powerful than you. If you prove disappointing, your demonstration will end in ways that even your considerable durability cannot withstand." Frieza's own smile matched the Emperor's for pure malice. "I wouldn't have it any other way. After all, what's a proper introduction without a little dramatic tension?" Coruscant gleamed like a jewel against the void, an entire planet transformed into one vast city, its surface a tapestry of towering spires, traffic lanes thick with speeders, and the endless sprawl of civilization layered kilometers deep. Frieza's commandeered shuttle descended through carefully controlled aerospace, flanked by a squadron of TIE fighters whose pilots had been given strict orders. Observe, do not engage. From the shuttle's viewport, Frieza studied the city planet with the practiced eye of a conqueror. Impressive, certainly. The architectural achievement alone demonstrated significant technological sophistication. He'd conquered worlds less developed and incorporated them into his Planet Trade Organization's portfolio. But the sheer scale of Coruscant, every square meter developed, billions of beings compressed into a single administrative hub, spoke to an empire built on bureaucratic control rather than raw military might. "Interesting," he murmured. In Universe 7, such concentration of population would be a strategic weakness. One well-placed attack could decapitate an entire government. But perhaps this Emperor Palpatine valued the symbolic power of such displays. Rule through presence and inevitability. The shuttle landed on a private platform extending from the Imperial Palace, a massive pyramidal structure that dominated Coruscant's governmental district. The architecture was deliberately imposing. Harsh angles, dark metals, massive statues of stormtroopers flanking entranceways. Every design choice screamed intimidation. Frieza approved. Aesthetics mattered in empire building. A reception committee awaited, 50 royal guards in their crimson robes and helmets, standing in perfect formation. Behind them, a thin man in a gray imperial officer's uniform bowed with calculated deference. Lord Frieza, the officer said, his voice carefully neutral, I am Grand Vizier Masameda. The Emperor has granted you audience. You will follow and obey all protocols, or the guards will terminate you where you stand. Frieza floated down the shuttle ramp, ignoring the steps entirely. How wonderfully ominous. Tell me, Grand Vizier, have these guards actually terminated anyone who proved a genuine threat? Or do they simply execute subordinates who've disappointed your emperor? He drifted past Ameta without waiting for a response. Lead on. I'm eager to meet the man who conquered a galaxy. The royal guards shifted, hands moving toward their force pikes, but Ameta raised a hand. This way. They walked, or, in Frieza's case, floated, through corridors designed to diminish visitors. The ceiling soared impossibly high, making even tall beings feel small. The walls were polished obsidian that reflected distorted images, disorienting guests. Every 50 meters, more royal guards stood sentinel, their presence a constant reminder of the Emperor's power. Frieza found it all rather quaint. He'd walk through the palaces of gods and emerged with their heads as trophies. They entered a massive turbolift that ascended for what felt like several minutes. When the doors finally opened, they revealed the throne room, a cavernous space dominated by shadows and architectural brutality. The Emperor's throne sat at the far end, positioned before a massive viewport that looked out over Coruscant's endless sprawl. But it was the figure on the throne that commanded attention. Emperor Palpatine sat hunched in his seat, robed in black, his face hidden in shadow except for those terrible yellow eyes. The air around him seemed heavy, oppressive with a presence that made even Frieza's dulled Kai senses prickle. This was concentrated malice given form, decades of hatred and ambition compressed into a single being. Approach, Palpatine commanded, his voice echoing in the vast space. Frieza drifted forward, crossing the throne room with deliberate casualness. The royal guards tensed, but none moved to stop him. When he reached the base of the throne's platform, he stopped, arms crossed, and met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. Emperor Palpatine, Frieza said with a slight nod, respect, but not submission. Thank you for the invitation. Your palace is quite impressive, very intimidating. I've built similar structures across thousands of worlds, so I recognize quality craftsmanship in authoritarian architecture. Palpatine's eyes narrowed. Through the Force, he reached out, probing this strange being who stood before him, and found nothing. Not emptiness. This creature was clearly alive, clearly intelligent, but a complete absence of Force sensitivity. It was like touching a wall where a doorway should be. The sensation was deeply unsettling. You claim to rule an empire, Palpatine said, yet you arrive alone in a stolen shuttle, having attacked my forces. This does not speak of an emperor. It speaks of a desperate refugee seeking leverage. Frieza's laugh echoed through the throne room. Oh, how delightful! You think I'm desperate? His amusement was genuine, unforced. No, Emperor, I'm simply dislocated. There's a significant difference. My empire exists in another universe entirely. Thousands of planets, dozens of species, all paying tribute to me and my family. I've personally destroyed more than 300 worlds that proved unprofitable or rebellious. I once wiped out an entire species because I found their warrior culture slightly annoying. He drifted upward slightly, bringing himself to eye level with the seated emperor. A calculated insult that made the royal guards shift nervously. I'm not here to beg, Palpatine. I'm here to negotiate. You see, I find myself in unfamiliar territory, and while I could simply carve out my own empire in this galaxy, and make no mistake, I absolutely could. I'm a businessman first. Cooperation is more profitable than conflict, provided both parties bring equal value to the table. Equal value? Palpatine's voice carried a dangerous edge. You presume much, creature. I have conquered this galaxy through patience, planning, and power. I have destroyed the Jedi Order that stood for 1,000 generations. I command military forces numbering in the billions. What could you possibly offer that I cannot simply take from your corpse? Frieza's smile widened, showing those needle-sharp teeth. Knowledge, technology, perspectives from a universe where power isn't limited by your mystical force. Tell me, Emperor, have you ever destroyed a planet? Not conquered it, not occupied it, but actually destroyed it, reduced it to asteroids and cosmic debris? Palpatine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those yellow eyes. The Death Star will be operational soon. It will possess such capability. A space station? Frieza's tail swished with amusement. How inefficient. I can destroy planets with my own power, Emperor. No weapon, no technology, just concentrated energy released in the right way. I've done it casually, almost absent-mindedly. Planet Vegeta, Planet Namek, both reduced to rubble because they were no longer useful to me. He held up one finger, and a tiny sphere of purple energy formed at his tip, no larger than a pearl but radiating power that made the air shimmer. The royal guard stepped back involuntarily. Even Palpatine leaned forward slightly, his force senses screaming warnings about the condensed energy in that small sphere. This, Frieza said quietly, is enough energy to obliterate this palace and everything within 5 kilometers. I'm holding it back, compressing it, keeping it stable through sheer will. If I released it properly, expanded its scope, I could crack Coruscant's crust. He let the sphere dissipate. But that would be counterproductive to negotiations, wouldn't it? Silence filled the throne room. Palpatine studied Frieza with new intensity, calculations running behind those ancient eyes. The creature wasn't bluffing. The Emperor could sense truth in the casual way Frieza had demonstrated his power. This being was genuinely capable of planetary destruction through biological means alone. Intriguing, Palpatine finally said. But power without purpose is merely destruction. What do you want, Lord Frieza? Several things, Frieza replied, counting on his fingers. First, information. Complete access to your galactic databases, star charts, species catalogs, economic networks, military dispositions. I need to understand this galaxy's structure. Second, legitimate operational status. I want to establish my organization here without constant interference from your star destroyers. Third, he paused, his smile turning predatory. I want to understand this force of yours. You've built an empire on it, manipulated it to destroy your enemies. I'm very curious about power systems I don't fully comprehend. And what do I receive in return? My services as an independent contractor, Frieza said. You have rebels, yes? Insurgents who resist your rule? Planets that refuse to comply? I specialize in making examples. Hire me to handle your more problematic situations. I work efficiently, thoroughly, and without moral complications. Plus, I bring military assets. Once I establish proper operations here, I can provide you with soldiers, ships, and technology from my universe. Consider it a mutually beneficial partnership between emperors. Palpatine was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled before him. Through the Force, he reached out to the future, seeking guidance in the tangled threads of destiny. What he saw was uncertain. This creature was a blind spot, a variable that shouldn't exist. But variables could be controlled, manipulated, used. You defeated Lord Vader, Palpatine said, easily from reports. He's skilled, Frieza acknowledged, considerably more durable than I expected. But he's handicapped by that suit, isn't he? I could sense the life support systems, the limitations built into his cybernetics. He was powerful once, I suspect, before whatever tragedy forced him into that armor. Lord Vader serves me absolutely, Palpatine said, a warning in his tone. He is my enforcer, my right hand. Any partnership between us requires you acknowledge this hierarchy. Frieza waved dismissively. I have no interest in your command structure, Emperor. I'll work independently, report to you directly, and avoid interfering with your precious Sith Lord. Though I do wonder. His eyes gleamed with cruel curiosity. What would happen if Vader were freed from those limitations? If he were restored to full power? Would he still serve so absolutely, or would ambition resurface? Palpatine's laugh was dry, humorless. You seek to manipulate me through obvious provocation. Crude, Lord Frieza. I expected more sophistication from a self-proclaimed emperor. Not manipulation, Frieza corrected. Observation. I've ruled through fear for decades, Emperor. I recognize the techniques. Vader is kept deliberately weakened, dependent on you for his survival. Classic control mechanism. I employ similar tactics with my own subordinates. He drifted closer to the throne, voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr. But here's what interests me. You're old. Powerful, certainly, but organic beings age. Vader is more machine than man, probably capable of functioning for decades beyond your natural lifespan. Yet you keep him chained. Why? The temperature in the throne room seemed to drop. Palpatine's eyes blazed with sudden intensity, and lightning, blue-white Sith lightning, crackled around his fingertips. You presume too much, creature. Frieza held up his hands in mock surrender. Merely curious speculation. I meant no offense. After all, we're discussing partnership, not psychoanalysis. His expression turned serious. Here's my proposition, Emperor. Give me one assignment, one problematic situation that your forces have struggled with. Let me demonstrate my value. If I succeed to your satisfaction, we discuss longer-term arrangements. If I fail or disappoint, well, he smiled, I suspect you have contingencies for that scenario. Palpatine studied Frieza for a long moment, the Force swirling around him as he weighed options and outcomes. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well. There is a situation. The Hutt cartels, crime syndicates operating in the Outer Rim, have grown too bold, too independent. They traffic in slaves, spice, and weapons, undermining imperial authority in sectors we've yet to fully pacify. Jabba the Hutt, their most prominent leader, operates from Tatooine. He's evaded our control through bribes, political connections, and the sheer difficulty of rooting out criminal empires in lawless space. Frieza's eyes lit up with interest. You want me to eliminate him? No, Palpatine said carefully. I want you to dominate him. Bend the Hutt cartels to Imperial service without destroying their infrastructure. They're useful for maintaining control in regions where official Imperial presence would be complicated. Prove you can conquer and subjugate rather than simply destroy, and we'll discuss more permanent arrangements. Criminal cartels, subjugation, maintaining profitable operations. Frieza's smile widened. Emperor, you've just described my core competency. I'll have your Hutt cartels reorganized and paying tribute within a standard week. Consider it a demonstration of what Lord Frieza brings to any partnership. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Emperor? One more thing. This force of yours, I'll figure it out eventually. I'm remarkably quick at adapting to new power systems. When I do, he glanced back, his red eyes gleaming. Well, let's just say our negotiations might take on a different character. Palpatine watched Frieza exit the throne room, his expression unreadable. When the doors sealed and only royal guards remained, he allowed himself a thin smile. Lord Vader's broken form had been retrieved from Mustafar and was being repaired. The cyborg would learn from his defeat, grow stronger, more motivated. And this Frieza creature, powerful, arrogant, predictable in his megalomania, would either prove useful or become another lesson in the dangers of challenging Sith mastery. Either outcome served the Emperor's purposes. In the corridor beyond, Frieza floated toward his shuttle, already planning his approach to Tatooine. Criminal cartels, he mused. How nostalgic. His planet trade organization had begun with similar foundations. Conquer, intimidate, extract profit, repeat. This galaxy was beginning to feel like home. Tatooine hung in space like a diseased pearl. Twin suns baking its desert surface, scattered settlements clinging to moisture farms and spaceports like parasites on dead skin. Frieza's shuttle descended toward Mos Eisley, the planet's largest spaceport and a notorious hive of smugglers, bounty hunters, and criminal enterprise. Below, the sandstone buildings radiated heat shimmers, and the spaceport's cantina district pulsed with the desperate energy of beings trying to forget where they were. Lord Frieza, the pilot ventured nervously, one of the Imperial officers who'd survived the Devastator incident and been conscripted into Frieza's temporary service. Jabba's palace is in the northern Dune Sea. We could proceed directly. No, Frieza said, studying the spaceport through the viewport. I don't make appointments with underlings. If this Jabba wants to meet me, he'll come to Mos Eisley. First, I need to understand the local ecosystem. His tail swished thoughtfully. Every criminal empire has fractures, ambitious lieutenants, rivals waiting for opportunity. I'll introduce myself to this galaxy's underworld properly. The shuttle landed on Docking Bay 94, a dusty platform that had seen better decades. As Frieza emerged, the twin suns hit him with a wave of heat that would have staggered most beings. He paused, tilting his head slightly. The solar radiation felt different, stronger, more intense than typical yellow suns. His body absorbed the energy instinctively, his dulled Kai responding to the stellar influx with a slight increase in efficiency. Interesting, he murmured. Perhaps this galaxy's different stellar configurations could accelerate his acclimation to the force-saturated environment. He floated into Mos Eisley proper, ignoring the stares from moisture farmers, Jawas, and rough-looking spacers. His appearance, chalk-white skin, bioarmor, hovering movement, marked him as alien even in a spaceport where dozens of species mingled. Whispers followed in his wake, conversations dying mid-sentence as he passed. The cantina was exactly what Frieza expected. Dim lighting, questionable hygiene, the smell of alcohol and desperation. A Bith band played discordant jazz in one corner. Patrons huddled in booths, Rhodians, Aqualish, humans, Duros, all with the hard-eyed look of beings who survived through violence and cunning. Frieza settled at the bar, his presence creating an expanding bubble of silence. The Wuher bartender approached with visible reluctance, his scarred face arranged in a professional scowl. "We don't serve," he began. Frieza placed a credit chip on the bar. Imperial credits he'd taken from the Devastator's vault. 5,000 credits, more than the cantina probably earned in a month. "Information," Frieza said pleasantly. "I'm new to Tatooine and eager to understand local power structures. Who controls the criminal operations here? Who profits from the spice trade, slave markets, and weapon smuggling? And most importantly," his smile widened, "who would be most interested in a change of management?" Wuher's eyes fixed on the credits. "You're asking dangerous questions, stranger. Jabba the Hutt controls Tatooine. Anyone who says different ends up digesting in the Sarlacc pit for 1,000 years. "Jabba," Frieza repeated as if tasting the name. "Yes, the Emperor mentioned him, but surely even a crime lord has rivals. Competitors who resent his monopoly?" Before Wuher could respond, a massive hand fell on Frieza's shoulder, or tried to. The moment it made contact, the owner, a Hauk enforcer, 3 meters of muscle and aggression, screamed and yanked his hand back. The flesh was blackened, smoking, as if he'd touched a thermal detonator. "What the—" The Hauk stared at his burned hand in disbelief. Frieza glanced back, expression mildly annoyed. "I don't appreciate being touched without permission. Consider that a warning." His body naturally radiated energy that could burn unprotected flesh on contact, a defensive measure he maintained unconsciously. The Hauk reached for a blaster with his uninjured hand. Frieza's tail moved faster, whipping across the bar and impaling the enforcer through his chest. The Hauk's eyes bulged, blood bubbling from his mouth, then Frieza casually withdrew his tail and let the body collapse. The cantina erupted. Blasters appeared from beneath tables and inside jackets. 20 weapons trained on Frieza from every angle, held by beings who'd killed for far less provocation. "Disappointing," Frieza sighed. He raised one hand and purple energy rippled outward in a sphere. Not an attack, but a demonstration. Every blaster within 10 meters flew from its owner's grip, yanked away by telekinetic force, and crushed into scrap metal. The weapons clattered to the floor as compressed balls of useless components. The cantina fell silent except for the Bith band, which had stopped playing mid-note. Now then, Frieza continued as if nothing had happened, turning back to woo her. You were telling me about Jabba's competitors? The bartender swallowed hard. Lady Valerian. She runs operations in Mos Eisley, moisture smuggling, protection rackets. Smaller than Jabba, but ambitious. Her headquarters is in the old warehouse district. But if you're thinking of making trouble, I'm not making trouble, Frieza corrected. I'm establishing new management. There's a significant difference. He stood, leaving the credits on the bar. Keep the change. Considerate payment for future discretion about this conversation. He floated toward the exit, the crowd parting before him like water before a ship's prow. At the doorway, he paused and addressed the room. A message for anyone who reports to Jabba the Hutt. Lord Frieza has arrived on Tatooine. I will be visiting his palace in 3 days. He should prepare appropriate hospitality and perhaps begin considering his retirement options. Then he was gone, leaving a cantina full of hardened criminals staring at each other in stunned silence. Lady Valerian's warehouse complex occupied the eastern edge of Mos Eisley, a sprawling compound protected by walls, guard towers, and enough firepower to repel casual raids. The whip-hid crime lord had built her operations carefully over decades, always careful not to provoke Jabba's wrath, but ambitious enough to profit from his blind spots. She was reviewing smuggling manifests when her security chief burst into her office. His expression panicked. Lady Valerian, we have a situation. Something just breached the perimeter defenses. The automated turrets are offline and... Frieza floated through the office window, not breaking it, but passing through the open frame with casual disregard for the 3-story drop outside. He settled into a chair opposite Valerian's desk, crossing one leg over the other, his tail curling around the armrest. Lady Valerian, I presume. How delightful to meet you. I'm Lord Frieza, and I'm here to discuss a business proposition. Valerian's hand moved toward the hidden blaster beneath her desk. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have my guards turn you into vapor. Because your guards can't, Frieza replied simply. Your automated turrets detected me and attempted to fire. I destroyed them. Your security team, 12 beings if my count is correct, are currently unconscious in your courtyard. I use non-lethal force as a courtesy, since I'm here for negotiation, not conflict. He leaned forward, his red eyes gleaming in the office's dim lighting. You resent Jabba's monopoly. You've built impressive operations in his shadow, always careful not to grow large enough to threaten him, but frustrated by the limitations he imposes. Am I correct? Valerian studied him carefully. She'd survived in Tatooine's criminal underworld through careful risk assessment. This creature, whatever he was, had infiltrated her compound effortlessly and spoke with the confidence of someone who'd crushed far more dangerous opponents. Who are you really? She asked. Imperial? Rival Hutt clan? Black Sun? None of those, Frieza said. I'm an independent operator recently arrived in this galaxy. The Emperor has tasked me with reorganizing Tatooine's criminal enterprises under Imperial oversight. I could simply destroy Jabba and install my own management, but that would be inefficient. I prefer to work with existing infrastructure when possible. So you want to use me against Jabba, Valerian said flatly. No, Frieza corrected. I want to replace Jabba and install you as Tatooine's primary crime lord, operating under my supervision. You keep your current operations, expand into Jabba's territories, and pay 20% tribute to my organization. In exchange, I eliminate your competition and provide protection from Imperial interference. 20% is non-negotiable, Frieza interrupted smoothly. But consider what you receive. Jabba's palace, his smuggling routes, his slave operations, his spice contacts. Your organization would increase in size by a factor of 10. Even with my cut, you'd profit enormously. His smile turned predatory. And if you decline, well, I'll make the same offer to one of Jabba's lieutenants after I've eliminated both of you. Business is business. Valerian's mind raced through calculations. Jabba had ruled Tatooine for decades through sheer power and connections. He had rankers, Gamorrean guards, and the protection of multiple Hutt clans. But this Frieza creature had breached her security like it was made of paper, and spoke with the casual arrogance of someone who'd conquered worlds. "What exactly are you?" she asked. Frieza's laugh echoed through the office. "I'm what your galaxy calls unprecedented. In my universe, I'm a conqueror, an emperor, and occasionally a genocidal maniac when planets disappoint me. Here, I'm your opportunity to either rule Tatooine or become a cautionary tale. Choose wisely." Valerian considered her options: refuse and likely die, or accept and possibly rule Tatooine's underworld with the backing of someone powerful enough to terrify even her experienced instincts. "If you can actually kill Jabba," she said slowly, "then we have a deal. But I want proof before I commit resources." "Proof?" Frieza stood, floating toward the window. "You'll have it in 3 days. I'm visiting Jabba's palace as promised. I always keep my appointments, Lady Valerian. It's important for one's reputation." He paused at the window, glancing back. "Oh, and do begin preparing your expansion plans. I expect efficient transitions when management changes. Minimizing operational disruption is key to profitable empire building." Then he shot upward into Tatooine's twin sun sky, leaving Valerian staring after him with a mixture of awe and terror. Word spread through Tatooine's underworld like wildfire. A strange being had challenged Jabba the Hutt openly, killed in forces in the cantina, and promised to visit the palace in 3 days. Bounty hunters whispered about enormous rewards. Smugglers placed bets on survival odds. In the slave pens, desperate beings prayed to their various gods that chaos might bring opportunity. And in his palace, surrounded by luxury built on suffering, Jabba the Hutt received the reports and laughed, a deep, booming sound that shook the throne room. His Twi'lek majordomo Bib Fortuna stood nervously beside the dais. "This Frieza creature, should we prepare defenses, mighty Jabba?" Bib Fortuna asked. "Ho ho ho!" Jabba rumbled in Hutes, his translator droid converting his words. "Let him come. Many have threatened Jabba. All have died. This will be amusing entertainment." In the dungeons below, a trapdoor led to the Rancor pit. In the throne room, armed guards stood ready. Outside, Tatooine's desert stretched endlessly, hiding dangers and the corpses of those who challenged Jabba's rule. And 3 days away, Frieza meditated in his commandeered shuttle, feeling the twin sun's radiation slowly restore his Kai to full capacity. The Force's interference was weakening as his body adapted to this galaxy's unique energy signature. Soon he would be operating at 100% efficiency. And then this galaxy would learn what true power looked like. The third day arrived with Tatooine's twin suns blazing overhead, turning the Dune Sea into a furnace of sand and heat shimmer. Frieza's shuttle approached Jabba's palace, a massive structure that squatted on the desert like a malignant tumor, its architecture a blend of ancient fortification and criminal excess. Guard towers bristled with weapons. Skiffs and sail barges rested in the courtyard. The entire compound radiated the message: death awaits those who challenge Jabba's power. Frieza found it charmingly primitive. He didn't bother landing. Instead, he simply floated down from the shuttle as it hovered overhead, descending toward the palace's main entrance with his arms crossed. Guards on the towers tracked his movement, fingers on triggers waiting for orders. The massive Durasteel gate ground open with mechanical reluctance. Inside, Jabba's throne room stretched before him, a deliberately overwhelming space designed to make petitioners feel small. The walls were decorated with trophies from Jabba's victims: carbonite frozen beings, rare artifacts, weapons from 100 worlds. The floor was polished stone that reflected the dim lighting, creating an atmosphere of perpetual twilight. And at the far end, on a raised dais, Jabba the Hutt lounged in his throne like a mountain of diseased flesh. The hut was massive, easily 4 meters of slug-like body covered in wrinkled greenish skin. His eyes were small and cunning beneath heavy lids, his mouth a wide slash filled with rows of blunt teeth designed for grinding food into submission. Around him clustered his court, Bib Fortuna, the Twi'lek majordomo, Salacious Crumb, a Kowakian monkey lizard that cackled at random intervals. A dozen armed guards, including Gamorreans, with vibro axes and human mercenaries with blaster rifles. And chained to the throne's base, a Twi'lek dancer named Ula cowered, her eyes filled with the resignation of someone who'd learned that escape was impossible. Frieza floated forward slowly, deliberately, his gaze taking in every detail. The guards tensed. Weapons tracked his movement, but no one fired. Jabba hadn't given the order, and in this palace, only Jabba's commands mattered. Mighty Jabba, Bib Fortuna announced with oily obsequiousness. This is the being who calls himself Lord Frieza. He has requested audience to discuss matters of business. Jabba's laugh rumbled through the throne room like distant thunder. He spoke in Hotus, his translator droid providing the basic translation in a flat, mechanical voice. Ho, ho, ho. So you are the fool who dared challenge Jabba's authority? Who killed my enforcer in the cantina? Who spoke of new management as if Jabba were some minor functionary to be dismissed? The Hutt's massive body rippled with amusement. You are either very brave or very stupid. Jabba suspects stupid. Frieza stopped 10 meters from the throne, his expression serene. Neither, actually. I'm simply efficient. I assessed your operation, identified the power structure, and approached you directly to offer terms. It's how I've conducted business across thousands of worlds. Terms? Jabba's small eyes narrowed. You offer Jabba terms? You have nothing Jabba wants, creature? You are merely the latest fool who thinks power comes from muscles and tricks. He gestured with one stubby arm, and a section of floor slid open with grinding mechanical sounds. The Rancor Pit. Below, in a dungeon chamber illuminated by flickering torches, something massive stirred. A roar echoed upward, bestial, hungry, the sound of a creature that knew only violence and feeding. The Rancor emerged into view, 5 meters of muscle, claws, and teeth, its hide scarred from countless battles, its eyes reflecting primitive rage. Jabba has fed many challengers to his pet, the translator droid announced. You will be digested slowly, very slowly. Frieza glanced down at the Rancor with the expression of someone examining an insect. A beast. How quaint. Tell me, Jabba, do you truly believe this creature could threaten me? After I casually disabled your courtyard defenses, walked through your guards, and stand here despite being surrounded by armed killers? You talk much, Jabba rumbled. Jabba grows bored. Guards! Throw him to the Rancor. 6 Gamorrean guards rushed forward, their pig-like faces twisted in aggressive determination. They were large beings, strong enough to wrestle full-grown humans, loyal to Jabba through years of brutal training. They grabbed for Frieza with meaty hands and screamed. The moment their flesh contacted Frieza's bioarmor, their hands began to burn. His body's natural energy field, fully restored now after 3 days under Tatooine's twin suns, seared through their skin like acid. The Gamorreans stumbled backward, staring at their blackened, smoking hands in disbelief. I warned your enforcer in the cantina, Frieza said pleasantly. I don't appreciate being touched without permission. The human mercenaries opened fire. Blaster bolts, 24 of them, converged on Frieza from every angle. The energy weapons that could punch through Durasteel armor, melt flesh, and kill most beings instantly. Frieza stood motionless as the bolt struck his body and dissipated harmlessly. Each impact created a small flash of light where energy met his natural defense, then faded without leaving a mark. When the firing stopped, when the mercenaries' power packs were drained, Frieza brushed his shoulder as if flicking away dust. My turn, he said. He raised one hand, fingers splayed, and purple energy beams lanced outward. Death beams, each one precisely targeted. The mercenaries dropped in perfect synchronization, smoking holes through their hearts, dead before they hit the ground. The Gamorreans tried to flee, but Frieza's tail moved like a striking snake, impaling 2 through their backs and flinging their bodies against the walls with wet, crunching sounds. Salacious crumbs cackling cut off mid-laugh. The throne room fell silent except for the Rancor's confused roaring from below. Jabba's expression shifted from amusement to calculation. His tiny hands moved toward hidden controls built into the throne's armrests. Weapon systems, poison gas dispensers, trapdoors. Decades of paranoia had turned his throne room into a death trap with multiple redundancies. Frieza was already moving. He appeared before Jabba in a blur of speed that left after images, his hand wrapped around Bib Fortuna's throat before the Twi'lek could even scream. "I'd suggest not triggering whatever defenses you're considering," Frieza said conversationally. "Your major domo will die first, and then I'll become considerably less cordial." Jabba froze, his small eyes locked on Frieza with newfound respect and fear. What? What do you want?" Finally, a sensible question. Frieza released Bib Fortuna, who collapsed gasping. "I want your organization, Jabba. Your smuggling routes, your criminal contacts, your profitable enterprises. I want Tatooine's underworld transferred to my management." "Jabba is Hutt." The crime lord's voice rose in desperation. "The Hutt clans will avenge." "The Hutt clans are in Hutt space, far from Tatooine," Frieza interrupted. "By the time they organize a response, assuming they care enough about you personally, I'll have consolidated control and established defenses they won't want to challenge. Besides," his smile turned cruel, "I'm not killing you, Jabba. I'm offering you a choice." He began floating upward, rising toward the throne's dais, his presence dominating the vast space. Option 1. You accept diminished status. You remain on Tatooine as my local administrator, managing day-to-day operations while I expand your organization's reach under Imperial sanction. You keep your palace, your luxuries, even some autonomy, but you pay tribute and obey my directives. Think of it as middle management. Jabba's face contorted with rage and humiliation. Jabba bows to no one. Option 2, Frieza continued as if the Hutt hadn't spoken. I kill you, feed your body to your own rancor, and install Lady Valerian as Tatooine's new crime lord. She's already agreed to my terms and is quite eager to expand into your territories. He drifted closer to Jabba's face, his red eyes gleaming. Option 3, you can try to kill me, which will result in your death and considerably more property damage. I'll leave the choice to you. I'm generous that way. The throne room was silent. Ula, still chained to the throne, watched with wide eyes, hardly daring to breathe. The surviving guards stood frozen, their weapons lowered, intelligent enough to recognize they were witnessing a changing of power. Jabba's mind raced. He'd ruled Tatooine for decades through cunning, brutality, and the Hutt clan's collective power. But this Frieza creature had casually massacred his guards, survived concentrated blaster fire, and demonstrated power that exceeded even the Empire's most dangerous enforcers. And if the creature truly had Imperial sanction? Percentage, Jabba finally growled. What tribute? 25% of gross profits, Frieza replied immediately. Negotiable down to 20% if your operational efficiency improves and you provide valuable intelligence about galactic criminal networks. Jabba accepts. The words came out strangled, forced through pride and pragmatism. But Jabba demands respect. Jabba is still power on Tatooine. Of course, Frieza said magnanimously. You'll maintain your public image, your palace, your reputation. As far as Tatooine's criminals know, you've simply entered a partnership with a powerful new ally. I have no interest in managing daily operations. That's tedious work better suited to experienced administrators. He floated down to where Ula crouched, studying the enslaved Twi'lek with clinical interest. This one, she's a slave. Entertainment, Jabba rumbled. When she displeases Jabba, she feeds the rancor. How wasteful. Frieza's tail snapped the chain with casual force, freeing Ula. The dancer stared at him in shock. You're free. Go. When she didn't move, paralyzed by disbelief, Frieza sighed. I said go. I dislike slavery. It's economically inefficient. Paid workers are more productive and loyal. Ula stumbled backward, then ran for the exit, hardly believing her escape. Jabba watched her go with impotent rage, but said nothing. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Now then, Frieza said, settling into a chair that one of the surviving guards hastily provided. Let's discuss your operations in detail. I want complete records, financial, operational, personnel. I'll need introductions to your major contacts in the smuggling networks, and I'll require access to your intelligence on rival criminal organizations. The Pike Syndicate, Black Sun, the Crimson Dawn remnants. I want to know everything. He crossed his legs, his tail coiling comfortably. Oh, and that rancor in your pit. Does it respond to training, or is it purely mindless aggression? Can, can be trained, Jabba admitted reluctantly. Why? I may have use for exotic creatures in future operations. A rancor properly deployed could be quite effective against lightly armed resistance. Frieza glanced toward the pit where the beast still roared. We'll discuss that later. For now, let's focus on immediate reorganization. I expect this transition to be smooth, Jabba. Minimal disruption, maximum efficiency. As the hours passed in Jabba's major domo, under Frieza's watchful gaze, began producing records and documentation, word spread through Tatooine's underworld. Jabba the Hutt had bent the knee. A new power had arrived, one that made even the galaxy's most feared crime lords submit. In Mos Eisley, Lady Valerian received the news with mixed emotions, relief that she'd chosen correctly, and apprehension about what serving this Frieza would actually entail. And on Coruscant, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine sensed a shift in the galactic order. The creature had succeeded, conquered without destroying, subjugated without excessive violence, demonstrated the efficiency he'd promised. Perhaps this partnership would prove more valuable than anticipated. Or perhaps, the Emperor mused, it would provide opportunities to study Frieza's weaknesses before the inevitable confrontation. Either way, the game had become considerably more interesting. 6 standard weeks after Frieza's conquest of Tatooine's underworld, the transformation was undeniable. Jabba's palace had become the administrative hub of what Frieza called the Galactic Trade Collective, a deliberately sanitized name for an operation that was fundamentally the Planet Trade Organization transplanted into Star Wars reality. Spice shipments moved with brutal efficiency. Slave markets were dissolved and converted to paid labor networks, more profitable as Frieza had predicted. Smuggling routes expanded into Imperial-controlled space with tacit approval from Coruscant. The profits were staggering. Frieza sat in what had been Jabba's throne room, now redecorated with sleeker, more refined aesthetics that reflected his personal taste. The grotesque trophies were gone, replaced by holographic displays showing financial data, shipping routes, and intelligence reports. Jabba himself operated from a secondary chamber, handling day-to-day management, while Frieza focused on strategic expansion. Lord Frieza, Bib Fortuna announced, entering with the nervous deference that had become his default state. There's a transmission from Coruscant. Imperial frequency, priority alpha. Frieza waved lazily, and the holo projector activated. Emperor Palpatine's hooded figure materialized, those yellow eyes gleaming with their usual calculating intensity. Emperor, Frieza greeted with mock warmth. How delightful to hear from you. I trust you've received my reports on the reorganization. Profits are up 43%, and Imperial Customs revenues from Outer Rim trade have increased substantially. Your efficiency is noted, Palpatine rasped. You have proven more competent than anticipated, which is why I'm extending your operations. The Emperor's thin smile was predatory. There is a rebel cell on Lothal, a minor operation, but one that has proven surprisingly resilient. They've evaded Imperial forces for months, receiving support from the local population. I want them eliminated. Completely. Frieza's interest peaked. Rebels? I've read about your insurgency problem. Idealists fighting against your tyranny with hope and determination. How tiresome for you. They are vermin, Palpatine hissed, but vermin with popular support are difficult to exterminate without creating martyrs. You, however, are not Imperial. You can operate with methods that would be politically complicated for official forces. You want me to make an example, Frieza translated. Crush the rebels so thoroughly that Lothal's population loses all hope of resistance. Psychological warfare. Precisely. And there is another factor. Palpatine leaned forward slightly. The rebel cell is led by a former Jedi Padawan named Kanan Jarrus. He survived Order 66 and has been training an apprentice, a boy with considerable force potential named Ezra Bridger. I want them both eliminated or captured. Inquisitors have failed. Lord Vader has been occupied with other matters. You will not fail. Frieza's smile widened. A Jedi. How interesting. I've been curious about your force-sensitive warriors. This will be an excellent opportunity to test their abilities against my own power. He stood, energy crackling around him with barely suppressed excitement. I accept the contract, Emperor. Lothal will serve as a demonstration of what happens when resistance meets true power. One condition, Palpatine added, his voice carrying warning. The boy, Ezra Bridger, I want him alive if possible. His potential interests me. The Jedi you may kill or capture as you see fit. Understood. I'll depart immediately. Frieza paused, his expression turning curious. Tell me, Emperor, why not simply bombard Lothal from orbit? Surely your Star Destroyers could reduce the planet's population centers to rubble. Because fear requires witnesses, Palpatine replied. Corpses cannot spread tales of Imperial power, but survivors tell stories that echo across the galaxy. You understand this, I think. Oh, I understand perfectly, Frieza purred. I've built an empire on such principles. Very well, Emperor. Expect results within the week. The transmission ended, and Frieza turned to Bib Fortuna. Prepare my ship, and inform Jabba that he's in charge during my absence. If profits drop more than 5%, I'll feed him to his own rancor personally. Lothal was a pastoral world in the Outer Rim, its surface a patchwork of grasslands, farms, and the sprawling industrial complex of Capital City. The Empire had transformed the planet into a manufacturing hub, TIE fighter factories, weapons production, mining operations that scarred the landscape. The native population had gone from peaceful farmers to exploited labor, their world strip mined for imperial expansion, the perfect breeding ground for rebellion. Frieza's ship, a sleek vessel he'd commissioned using his new criminal profits, designed to his specifications, descended toward Capital City without requesting landing clearance. Imperial sensors detected the approach, and within minutes, a squadron of TIE fighters scrambled to intercept. Unidentified vessel, you are entering restricted Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. Frieza activated the communication channel personally. This is Lord Frieza, operating under direct authorization from Emperor Palpatine. I'm here to resolve your rebel problem. Clear me for landing at the Imperial headquarters, and someone should probably inform Governor Price that she has a visitor. There was a long pause, followed by frantic cross-checking of Imperial databases. Finally, clearance granted, Lord Frieza. Governor Price is being notified. The ship landed on the Imperial headquarters primary platform, a massive structure that dominated Capital City's skyline, bristling with communications arrays and defensive weapons. Governor Erinda Price waited at the landing pad with an honor guard of stormtroopers, her expression carefully neutral. She was a striking woman, sharp-featured, ambitious eyes, the bearing of someone who'd clawed her way to power through intelligence and ruthlessness. She'd read the reports about Frieza, the classified briefings from Coruscant, the creature that had conquered Tatooine's underworld in a week, that operated with the Emperor's personal sanction, that had somehow defeated Darth Vader in single combat, and now he was here, on her planet, to deal with her rebel problem. Frieza emerged from his ship, floating down the ramp with arms crossed. He studied Price with the same clinical assessment he applied to all potential tools or obstacles. Governor Price, he said with a slight nod, how delightful. The Emperor speaks highly of your administrative abilities. Tell me, how has a competent governor allowed a rebel cell to operate freely for months? I'm genuinely curious. Price's jaw tightened, but her voice remained level. The rebels have local support and knowledge of the terrain. They strike quickly and disappear before we can respond. We've destroyed several of their safe houses, but they always establish new ones. So you're fighting symptoms rather than the disease, Frieza observed. You're hunting the rebels themselves instead of eliminating their support structure. Classic mistake. He drifted past her toward the headquarters entrance. I'll need complete intelligence on the rebels, known members, suspected hideouts, operational patterns, and I'll need current locations of large civilian gatherings, markets, factories, entertainment districts. Why civilian locations? Price asked, following quickly. Frieza glanced back, his red eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Because the rebels hide among civilians. They depend on popular support. So we're going to demonstrate the cost of harboring insurgents. A simple equation: support rebels, suffer consequences. Most populations are remarkably pragmatic once the mathematics become clear. Price felt a chill run down her spine. She'd ordered harsh crackdowns, used imperial propaganda, even authorized selective executions. But something in Frieza's casual tone suggested a level of brutality that exceeded even imperial standards. "The Emperor wants the boy, Ezra Bridger, alive," she reminded him. "Yes, yes, I'm aware." Frieza waved dismissively. "I'm quite good at selective targeting. The boy will be captured, the Jedi will be eliminated, and Lothal's population will learn a valuable lesson about the price of rebellion." In the Lothal grasslands hidden beneath a communications tower that had been abandoned years ago, the Ghost Crew gathered in their makeshift base. Kanan Jarrus, tall, bearded, carrying himself with the carefully controlled discipline of a trained Jedi, studied the holographic reports with growing concern. "Something's wrong," he said, reaching out through the Force. "I can feel it. A disturbance. Like a void in the tapestry." Ezra Bridger, 17, dark-haired, with the cocky confidence of youth tempered by real combat experience, looked up from cleaning his lightsaber. "More Inquisitors?" "No." Kanan's hand moved to his own lightsaber unconsciously. "Something different. Something I've never felt before. It's like there's a blank space where something powerful should be." Harrison Dula, the Ghost's Twi'lek pilot and the crew's de facto leader, checked her datapad. "Imperial chatter has increased. They're talking about a special operative arriving from Coruscant, someone with direct authorization from the Emperor himself." "Vader?" Sabine Wren asked, the Mandalorian explosives expert already checking her weapons. "The transmissions don't say," Hera replied, "but they're preparing for something big. Increased patrols, civilian curfews extended, factories on high alert." Kanan closed his eyes, reaching deeper into the Force. What he sensed made his blood run cold. Not darkness exactly, not the suffocating evil of the Sith, but an absence. A void that radiated power without touching the Force at all. It was wrong, unnatural, like sensing a black hole where a star should be. "We need to be ready," he said quietly. "Whatever's coming, it's beyond anything we've faced before." "We've handled Inquisitors," Ezra said with forced confidence. "We've survived Imperial assaults. We'll handle this too." Kanan looked at his apprentice, brave, talented, still so young, and felt fear coil in his gut. In all his years surviving the Empire, hiding his Jedi identity, fighting in the shadows, he'd developed instincts that had kept him alive. Those instincts were screaming now. In Capital City, Frieza stood on the Imperial headquarters observation deck, looking out over Lothal's sprawling urban landscape. Below, thousands of beings went about their lives, working in factories, shopping in markets, living under Imperial occupation with sullen compliance. "Tell me, Governor," he said without looking back at Price, who stood at respectful distance, "how attached are you to Lothal's manufacturing capabilities? Can production be relocated if necessary?" "The factories are critical to regional weapons output," Price replied carefully. "But technically, yes, manufacturing could be shifted to other systems given sufficient time and resources." "Excellent." Frieza's smile was terrible to behold. "Then we have operational flexibility. I do so appreciate when collateral damage doesn't interfere with long-term profitability." He raised one finger, and a tiny sphere of purple energy formed at its tip, barely visible, no larger than a pinprick, but radiating power that made the observation deck's transper steel vibrate. "Tomorrow the rebels will learn what it means to challenge Lord Frieza, and Lothal will become a lesson the galaxy won't soon forget." The morning sun rose over Capital City's industrial district, illuminating thousands of workers filing into the massive manufacturing complex designated Factory Sector 7. Most were human, with a scattering of other species, all wearing the exhausted expressions of beings who'd endured Imperial occupation, long enough to know that resistance meant death, but compliance meant slow degradation. Among them, disguised in worker coveralls, were three members of the Ghost Crew: Sabine, Ezra, and Zeb, the massive Lasat warrior who served as the crew's muscle. Their mission was simple: Plant explosives in the factory's primary power distribution center, cripple production for weeks, and escape in the chaos. Standard rebel operations: hit Imperial infrastructure, avoid civilian casualties, disappear before reinforcements arrived. They had no idea they were being watched. Frieza hovered 3 kilometers above Capital City, invisible to sensors and naked eyes alike, his Kai suppression technique keeping him undetectable. Governor Price had provided excellent intelligence, the rebels' typical operational patterns, their known safe houses, their tendency to target factories rather than military installations. Predictable, really. Idealists always followed patterns shaped by their moral limitations. Through his enhanced vision, a natural ability amplified by decades of combat experience, Frieza could see the 3 figures moving through the factory's service corridors. He recognized the Mandalorian from intelligence reports. Sabine Wren, explosives expert, former Imperial Academy student turned traitor. The Lasat was Garaseb Aurelios, survivor of a species the Empire had nearly exterminated. And the boy, Ezra Bridger, Force-sensitive, Jedi apprentice, the target the Emperor wanted alive. Frieza descended slowly, a predator positioning itself for the perfect strike. Inside Factory Sector 7, Ezra felt the disturbance through the Force a split second before it arrived. That same void sensation Kanan had described, but exponentially stronger, closer, present. His hand moved to his lightsaber. "Something's wrong," he hissed to Sabine. "We need to abort." "We're almost at the target," Sabine replied, checking her datapad. "2 more corridors and—" The factory's roof exploded inward. Durasteel beams shrieked as they tore apart. Worker droids sparked and died. Emergency klaxons wailed. And through the hole in the ceiling descended Frieza, his white form backlit by Lothal's sun, looking like a demon manifesting from nightmare. He landed in the center of the factory floor with casual grace, and suddenly every worker, every droid, every being present felt the weight of his presence. Not force pressure, but raw, overwhelming power that made survival instincts scream danger. "Good morning," Frieza said pleasantly, his voice carrying effortlessly over the alarms. "I'm looking for 3 rebels. A Mandalorian, a Lasat, and a Force-sensitive boy. I know you're here. This would be considerably easier if you simply surrendered." Ezra, Sabine, and Zeb exchanged glances from their hiding spot behind a manufacturing assembly line. Around them, workers fled in panic, abandoning their stations in a stampede toward emergency exits. "Who the hell is that?" Zeb growled, hefting his bow rifle. "No idea," Sabine replied, already calculating explosive options. "But if the Empire sent him, he's the real deal." Ezra reached out through the Force, trying to sense their opponent, and recoiled as if he'd touched a live wire. The being wasn't dark side, wasn't light side, wasn't anything in the Force. He was a blank spot, a void that somehow radiated more danger than any Inquisitor Ezra had ever faced. "We can't fight him," Ezra said with sudden certainty. "I don't know what he is, but we need to run. Now." They bolted for the service exit, Sabine throwing smoke grenades behind them to cover their escape. The factory floor filled with thick gray clouds, obscuring vision and sensor readings. Frieza sighed. How tedious. He raised one hand and released a pulse of telekinetic force. Not the Force, but Kai-based energy manipulation that operated on different principles. The shock wave blasted outward in a sphere, dispersing the smoke instantly and slamming into walls, machines, and fleeing workers with bone-breaking impact. The 3 rebels were thrown forward, tumbling across the factory floor. Zeb's bow rifle clattered away. Sabine's armor sparked where shrapnel struck. Ezra rolled to his feet, lightsaber igniting in a brilliant blue blade, the weapon his master had helped him construct. Frieza's eyes gleamed with interest. "Ah, there you are, and carrying a lightsaber too. How delightful." Ezra didn't waste breath on words. He charged, channeling the Force into his speed and strength, his blade arcing toward Frieza's neck in a killing strike that Kanan had drilled into him through thousands of training sessions. Frieza caught the lightsaber blade between 2 fingers. The plasma edge screamed against his fingertips, energy crackling and spitting, but couldn't cut through. Ezra's eyes widened in disbelief. This was impossible. Lightsabers cut through everything. They were elegant weapons from a more civilized age. They couldn't be stopped by bare flesh. Frieza's other hand moved almost too fast to see, striking Ezra's chest with an open palm. The force-sensitive boy flew backward, crashing through a manufacturing assembly line and into a Durasteel support pillar, hard enough to leave a dent. "The Emperor wants you alive," Frieza said, releasing the lightsaber blade and letting Ezra's weapon deactivate as the boy lost his grip. "So I'll exercise restraint. Your friends, however," his gaze shifted to Sabine and Zeb. "No such restrictions apply." Sabine triggered her jetpack, rocketing upward while firing her blaster pistols. Zeb charged from the opposite direction, bow rifle set to full power, energy bolts streaking toward Frieza from two angles simultaneously. Frieza didn't move. The bolt struck his body and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by his natural energy field. He looked up at Sabine with mild annoyance. "Mandalorians, I've read about your warrior culture. Quite impressive by this galaxy's standards." His tail whipped upward faster than her armored reflexes could track, wrapping around her ankle mid-flight and yanking her downward. Sabine slammed into the factory floor with enough force to crack her helmet's visor. Before she could recover, Frieza's foot pressed down on her chest, pinning her with casual strength that her armor's servos couldn't overcome. "Tell me," he said conversationally, "does Mandalorian armor protect against vacuum exposure? I'm curious." Zeb roared and swung his bow rifle like a club, the weapon's electrified end crackling with enough energy to stun a bantha. It connected with Frieza's head with a satisfying crack, and Frieza's head didn't move. The Lasat stared in horror as Frieza slowly turned to face him, the being's expression shifting from boredom to irritation. "That," Frieza said quietly, "was rude." His hand shot out, gripping Zeb's throat and lifting the massive warrior off his feet as easily as picking up a child. Zeb struggled, his enhanced strength useless against the crushing pressure. His vision began to darken, oxygen cut off, consciousness fading. "Stop!" Ezra was back on his feet, one hand extended, reaching through the force with desperate intensity. Machinery around the factory floor began to shake, levitate, ripped free by telekinetic power, amplified by fear and adrenaline. Durasteel beams, assembly robots, tool crates, dozens of objects launched toward Frieza like missiles. Frieza released Zeb, letting the Lasat collapse gasping, and watched the incoming barrage with analytical interest. At the last second, his own telekinetic power activated, ki manipulation rather than force technique, and every object stopped midair, frozen in place. "Impressive," Frieza admitted. "Crude, emotionally driven, but impressive for your age and training." With a gesture, he sent all the debris crashing harmlessly to the sides. "The Emperor was right to be interested in your potential. You could become quite powerful, given proper instruction." "I'll never serve the Empire," Ezra spat, retrieving his lightsaber and igniting it again. "I'm not asking you to serve the Empire," Frieza replied. "I'm taking you to the Emperor. What happens after that is between you and him." He began walking forward, each step deliberate, unhurried. "Your friends will die here unless you surrender. Simple mathematics, 3 lives versus 1 capture. Make the heroic choice, boy." Ezra's mind raced. He couldn't beat this creature. Every instinct, every ounce of force sensitivity screamed that fighting was suicide. But if he surrendered, Sabine and Zeb might survive, might escape, might warn the others. "Ezra, don't—" Sabine tried to speak, but Frieza's tail tightened around her, cutting off words. "I surrender," Ezra said, deactivating his lightsaber and dropping it. "Let them go." Frieza smiled. "How noble. But I'm afraid I can't let them go. They've seen too much, know too much. They're witnesses to my capabilities." His expression turned apologetic. "I did warn your friends. The Emperor's restrictions only apply to you." He raised one finger, and death beams began to form. The factory wall exploded inward. Through the breach came the Ghost, its forward cannons blazing, piloted by Hera with desperate precision. Laser fire raked across the factory floor, forcing Frieza to dodge for the first time since arriving on Lothal. Kanan leaped from the ship's boarding ramp, his green lightsaber ignited, force-enhanced speed carrying him directly toward Frieza. "Get them out!" Kanan shouted to Hera. The ship's cargo ramp extended, magnetic grapples shooting out to snag Sabine, Zeb, and Ezra. They were yanked upward into the Ghost's hold as Hera threw the ship into a tight spiral, evading Frieza's retaliatory energy beams. Kanan engaged Frieza directly, his lightsaber work honed through years of survival. Form 3, Sorisu, the defensive style that had kept him alive through Order 66 and beyond. His blade moved in perfect arcs, deflecting strikes, creating protective barriers, never overextending. Frieza studied the Jedi with newfound respect. You're better than the boy, trained, disciplined, experienced. His tail struck like a viper, but Kanan's lightsaber intercepted it, the plasma blade cutting a shallow furrow through Frieza's bioarmor. For the first time since arriving in the Star Wars galaxy, Frieza felt pain. He looked down at the wound, barely bleeding, already closing through his natural regeneration. And his expression shifted from amusement to genuine interest. "You actually hurt me," he said with something approaching delight. "The lightsaber can penetrate my defenses if wielded with sufficient skill and power. How wonderful! This galaxy is full of surprises." Above, the Ghost was pulling away, its engines screaming as Hera pushed for maximum speed. Frieza's eyes tracked the ship's trajectory, calculating intercept vectors. "Another time, Jedi," he said to Kanan. Then he shot upward through the factory's destroyed roof, accelerating toward the escaping ship faster than any starfighter. Kanan felt ice in his veins as he watched Frieza pursue his crew. Through the Force, he reached out desperately. "Hera! He's coming!" On the Ghost Bridge, Hera saw Frieza's energy signature overtaking them on sensors. "Hold on!" she shouted, throwing the ship into an emergency atmospheric dive, using Lothal's gravity well to accelerate beyond normal operational limits. Frieza closed the distance effortlessly, his Kai-powered flight faster than repulsor technology. He extended both hands, gathering energy for a blast that would cripple the ship's engines. A TIE fighter squadron appeared from nowhere, laser cannons blazing. Caught between the standing orders to engage rebel vessels and the terrifying presence of Frieza in their flight path. Their shots scattered wildly, some striking the Ghost's shields, others passing dangerously close to Frieza. "Idiots!" Frieza snarled, his concentration broken. He spun mid-flight and destroyed 3 TIE fighters with casual death beams, then watched in frustration as the Ghost disappeared into Lothal's cloud banks, its jamming systems disrupting sensor locks. By the time he'd descended back to Capital City, the rebels were gone, vanished into the grasslands using escape routes that only locals knew. Frieza landed on the Imperial headquarters platform where Governor Price waited, her expression carefully neutral despite the smoking wreckage of Factory Sector 7 visible in the distance. "They escaped," she observed unnecessarily. "A temporary setback," Frieza replied, though his voice carried an edge of irritation. "The boy interests me. The Jedi is more skilled than anticipated, and their pilot," he smiled slowly, remembering the Ghost's impossible maneuvering. "Competent adversaries make victories more satisfying." He turned to face Price directly. "Governor, I need you to issue a planet-wide broadcast. Every citizen of Lothal will hear this message. Can your communications array reach every settlement?" "Yes, but..." "Excellent. Record this." Within the hour, every holoscreen, every comlink, every public broadcast system on Lothal carried the same transmission. Frieza's white form, his red eyes gleaming, his voice carrying the pleasant tone of someone discussing weather rather than genocide. "People of Lothal, I am Lord Frieza. Your planet harbors rebels who oppose the Empire. These insurgents hide among you. Depend on your silence. Exploit your protection. This ends now. You have 48 standard hours to identify and surrender all known rebel operatives and sympathizers. Failure to comply will result in consequences that your grandchildren will remember. I suggest you choose wisely. The Empire can be merciful. I cannot." The transmission ended, leaving Lothal's population in stunned, terrified silence. And in their hidden base, the Ghost crew watched the broadcast with growing horror, realizing that Frieza had just turned every civilian on the planet into either an informant or a target. The 48 hours passed like a countdown to apocalypse. Across Lothal, civilians faced impossible choices: betray neighbors suspected of rebel sympathies, or risk becoming targets themselves. Some communities chose solidarity, refusing to cooperate despite the threat. Others, ground down by years of imperial occupation, saw opportunity to settle old grudges or curry favor with their oppressors. Governor Price's office was flooded with reports, anonymous tips, accusations, desperate pleas for mercy. Some intelligence was legitimate, safe house locations, supply cache coordinates, names of known sympathizers. Most was noise, paranoid neighbors accusing each other, old rivalries disguised as patriotism. Frieza reviewed it all with the detached efficiency of someone who'd processed similar information across thousands of conquered worlds. This one, he said, highlighting a report on the holographic display. Tarkentown, the refugee settlement outside Capital City. Multiple sources confirm rebel activity there. Supply drops, recruitment, information networks. He glanced at Price. Population? Approximately 3,000, Price replied, her voice carefully neutral. Mostly displaced persons, beings who lost homes to imperial development projects. They're problematic. High crime rates, resistance to authority. In other words, a breeding ground for insurgency. Frieza stood, his tail swishing thoughtfully. Perfect. We'll make the demonstration there. Evacuate any Imperial personnel within 5 kilometers. I want no friendly casualties. You're planning to destroy the entire settlement? Even Price, hardened by Imperial service, felt a chill. 3,000 civilians, most of whom were simply desperate refugees. Not destroy, Frieza corrected. Erase. There's a difference. Destruction leaves ruins, evidence, places for survivors to gather and mourn. Erasure leaves nothing. No bodies, no buildings, no proof anyone ever existed there except official records. His smile was terrible. It's far more effective psychologically. Beings can rationalize death. They struggle with absolute absence. In the hidden base beneath the abandoned communications tower, the Ghost crew prepared for the inevitable. Kanan meditated, seeking guidance from the Force while battling the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. Ezra paced like a caged animal, his hands clenching and unclenching on his lightsaber. Hera ran system checks on the Ghost for the 3rd time, finding comfort in mechanical routine. Sabine reviewed intelligence reports, and Zeb cleaned his bow rifle with mechanical precision. We can't let this happen, Ezra said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. 3,000 people are going to die because of us, because we fight the Empire. 3,000 people were dying slowly under Imperial occupation anyway, Kanan replied, his eyes still closed. Frieza didn't create this situation. He's just making the Empire's brutality visible. That's not good enough. Ezra's voice rose with desperate passion. We have to do something. Evacuate Tarkentown. Attack Frieza directly. Something besides hiding while innocent people are murdered. Kanan opened his eyes and the weight of experience showed in his gaze. And if we reveal ourselves, he'll kill them anyway, and us too. We can't beat him, Ezra. You felt his power. I barely scratched him with a direct lightsaber strike. He's beyond anything we can handle. Then we contact the larger rebellion, Hera interjected. Get reinforcements, coordinate a proper military response. There's no time, Sabine said, looking up from her datapad. The deadline expires in 4 hours. Even if we sent a distress signal right now, no one could reach Lothal in time. The reality settled over them like a funeral shroud. They were going to watch Tarkentown die, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Unless, Ezra's voice was quiet, almost hopeless. Unless I surrender. That's what he wanted, right? Me. If I turn myself in, maybe he'll call off the attack. No. Kanan's response was immediate, absolute. He'll take you and destroy Tarkentown anyway. Beings like Frieza don't negotiate in good faith. They use mercy as bait and cruelty as enforcement. You don't know that. I know exactly that, Kanan snapped, his usual calm cracking. I've seen it before. The Empire uses the same tactics. Promise mercy, then betray it publicly to demonstrate that resistance is hopeless. Frieza is just more efficient at it. Ezra slumped against the wall, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt facing Inquisitors or Stormtroopers. Those enemies he could fight. This was just inevitability. Through the Force, Kanan felt it too. A gathering darkness, Not the dark side, but something equally terrible. A void preparing to consume, an absence about to make itself known through catastrophic presence. We bear witness, he said quietly. We remember. And when this is over, we make sure the galaxy knows what the Empire is willing to unleash. We turn Frieza's demonstration against him. Show that the Empire employs monsters because their cause is monstrous. It was cold comfort, but it was all they had. Tarkin Town sprawled across dusty ground like a wound. Makeshift structures built from salvaged materials. Narrow alleys winding between hovels. The desperate architecture of beings with nothing trying to build something. 3,000 souls lived here. Families displaced by imperial development. Species deemed undesirable by humanocentric policies. Refugees from worlds that had resisted occupation. They'd heard Frieza's broadcast. Some had fled already, heading into the grasslands with whatever they could carry. But most remained, either too poor to leave, too stubborn to abandon their meager homes, or simply too worn down to believe the threat was real. The Empire made threats constantly. Actual follow-through was rare enough that many had become numb to it. They were about to learn a fatal lesson about the difference between Imperial threats and Frieza's promises. He arrived alone, floating down from the sky as Lothal's sun reached its apex. No stormtroopers, no star destroyers, no Imperial escort. Just a small white figure descending toward Tarkin Town's central square, where the settlement's unofficial leaders had gathered. A mix of species trying desperately to negotiate. An elderly Ithorian stepped forward, his twin mouths producing the species' distinctive stereo voice. Lord Frieza, we are simple refugees. We have no connection to the rebellion. Please, there are children here, families. I'm aware, Frieza replied pleasantly, settling to hover at eye level. I've reviewed the census data. 3,247 beings currently residing in this settlement, 12 species represented, approximately 800 juveniles. He tilted his head slightly. Did any of you provide information about rebel activities during the grace period I generously offered? Silence. The assembled leaders exchanged glances, their expressions mixing defiance with fear. No? Frieza's smile widened. How disappointing. You see, I gave Lothal a simple choice. Cooperate and live, or protect rebels and face consequences. You chose to remain silent, which I interpret as choosing the latter option. We don't know anything about rebel, a human woman shouted from the growing crowd. We're just trying to survive. Perhaps, Frieza acknowledged. But ignorance and silence serve the same purpose as active support. If you truly knew nothing, you would have said so officially. Instead, this settlement maintained its characteristic defiance of imperial authority. He rose higher, his voice carrying across Tarkin Town with unnatural clarity. Let me be perfectly clear about what's about to happen. This settlement will cease to exist. Not be destroyed, not be occupied. Will cease to exist. And it will serve as a lesson to every other community on Lothal about the cost of harboring insurgents. He continued rising, ascending to several hundred meters above the settlement. Below, panic erupted, beings running for the perimeter, parents grabbing children, desperate attempts at escape scattering in all directions. Frieza watched with clinical detachment, then raised both hands above his head. Purple energy began to gather between his palms, not a death ball meant for planetary destruction, but something more focused. An eraser cannon, concentrated destructive power designed to obliterate a specific target completely. The energy sphere grew, crackling with barely contained force, turning the air incandescent. It grew to the size of a speeder, then a building, then a small starship, pulsing with power that made the very atmosphere scream. In the hidden rebel base, Kanan felt it through the force, a gathering of power so immense it created ripples in reality itself. No, he whispered, knowing what was coming. Frieza smiled, the expression of an artist about to complete a masterpiece. Goodbye, Tarkin Town. He released the eraser cannon. The sphere descended like a falling sun, purple-white incandescence that illuminated everything within dozens of kilometers. It struck the center of Tarkin Town and detonated, releasing energy that converted matter directly into component particles. The explosion was silent for a fraction of a second, a moment where reality itself seemed to pause, struggling to process what was happening. Then the shock wave erupted outward. Buildings didn't explode or collapse. They simply ceased, converted to atomic dust by the overwhelming energy. Beings caught in the initial blast didn't burn or die. They were erased, their molecules scattered across a crater that appeared where Tarkentown had been. The outer edge of the settlement fared worse. Those trying to flee were caught by the shockwave's edge, experiencing seconds of agony as their bodies were simultaneously vaporized and torn apart. Their screams were lost in the roar of displaced air and energy discharge. When the light faded and the smoke cleared, Tarkentown was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. A perfectly circular crater, 2 kilometers wide and 50 meters deep, marked where 3,000 beings had lived moments before. The ground was glassed, fused into smooth obsidian by the heat. No bodies remained, no buildings, no evidence that civilization had ever existed there, except the artificial geometry of the crater itself. Frieza descended to the crater's edge, studying his work with satisfaction. The mathematics were perfect, precise destruction with no wasted energy, complete erasure with maximum psychological impact. Around the crater's perimeter, surviving witnesses stood frozen in shock, their minds struggling to process the absolute nature of the annihilation they'd witnessed. This, Frieza announced, his voice carrying across the stunned silence, is what happens when you harbor rebels, when you resist imperial authority, when you choose solidarity over survival. He turned slowly, making eye contact with as many witnesses as possible. The next settlement to provide sanctuary to insurgents will meet the same fate. The choice, as always, is yours. He shot upward, leaving behind a crater that would serve as a monument to terror, a scar on Lothal's surface visible from orbit, impossible to fill or forget. At Imperial headquarters, Governor Price watched the surveillance footage with a mixture of awe and horror. She'd ordered harsh crackdowns, authorized executions, seen civilians die as collateral damage in military operations. But this was something beyond Imperial doctrine. This was punishment elevated to art form, terror made mathematics. "The Emperor will be pleased," she said, her voice hollow. "The Emperor understands necessity," Frieza replied, having returned to headquarters within minutes. "Fear is only effective if it's calibrated correctly. Too little, and beings grow bold. Too much, and they become desperate enough to attempt anything. But this," he gestured toward the holographic display showing the crater. "This is the perfect amount, enough to terrify, but localized enough that survival remains possible through cooperation." "And if the rebels retaliate?" Price asked. Frieza's laugh was cold crystal. "I hope they do. The boy interests me, and I've only just begun understanding how to fight beings who wield this force of yours." He flexed his hand, remembering how Kanan's lightsaber had actually cut him. "They'll come eventually. Idealists always do. They can't help themselves. They see injustice and feel compelled to act, even when action is suicide." He was right. In the hidden base, the Ghost crew had watched it all through long-range surveillance, forced to witness the erasure of 3,000 beings while they hid in safety. The weight of it pressed down on them like a physical force. Ezra was the first to speak, his voice brittle with fury and grief. "We're going to kill him." "Ezra," Kanan began. "We're going to kill him," Ezra repeated louder, the force crackling around him with dark energy born from rage and helplessness. "I don't care if he's stronger. I don't care if it's suicide. 3,000 people died because we exist, because we fight. We owe them justice." "Revenge isn't justice," Kanan said, but his words rang hollow even to himself. "Then it's revenge," Ezra snarled. "I can live with that." Hera stood, her expression hardening into the determined mask she wore when making command decisions. "Kanan, contact the larger rebellion. Get every asset you can to Lothal. Ships, troops, Jedi if any will come. We can't beat Frieza alone." "And if they say no," Sabine asked quietly, "if they decide Lothal isn't strategically valuable enough to risk major forces?" "Then we die trying anyway," Zeb growled, his massive hands clenching into fists. "Because the alternative is living knowing we let this happen." Kanan looked at his crew, his family, and saw the same determination in all their eyes. They knew this was likely suicide, They understood Frieza's power exceeded anything they could realistically counter. But they were going to fight anyway, because the alternative was abandoning everything they believed in. "Contact the rebellion," he said quietly, "and may the force be with us. We're going to need it." Across Lothal, in homes and settlements and imperial facilities, beings processed what they'd witnessed. Some would break, providing information to avoid Tarkin Town's fate. Others would harden, their hatred of the Empire crystallizing into absolute resolve. A few would begin planning evacuation, abandoning the planet rather than choosing sides. And in orbit, an Imperial transmission raced toward Coruscant, carrying footage of the demonstration and a simple message: mission successful, rebels identified, final confrontation imminent. Emperor Palpatine received the transmission in his throne room, watching the crater's formation with the appreciation of someone who understood power's language. Lord Frieza had proven his value: ruthless efficiency without wasteful destruction, terror deployed with surgical precision. But the Emperor's smile faded as he sensed something through the Force. A gathering storm, threads of destiny converging on Lothal, possibilities multiplying in dangerous directions. The boy, Ezra Bridger, was radiating dark side energy: anger, hatred, desire for revenge. Perfect emotions for corruption, but dangerous if channeled through desperation rather than control. And there was something else, a presence moving toward Lothal that made even the Emperor's ancient senses recoil slightly. Another void in the Force, but different from Frieza. This one was familiar, mechanical, suffused with barely controlled rage. Darth Vader was coming to Lothal. The Emperor's smile returned. Let his apprentice and the alien enforcer work together, or against each other. Either outcome would provide valuable data about Frieza's limitations and Vader's continued reliability. The game was escalating beautifully. 3 days after the Tarkin Town massacre, Lothal had transformed into a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Imperial patrols tripled. Civilian curfews locked down entire city districts. The crater remained unfilled. Governor Price had ordered it preserved as a permanent reminder, though she privately suspected it would become a pilgrimage site for martyrs rather than a monument to submission. In the grasslands beyond Capital City, the ghost sat camouflaged beneath thermal netting, surrounded by the largest gathering of rebel forces Lothal had ever seen. 30 fighters, a mix of older Y-Wings, A-Wings, and salvaged Z-95 headhunters. 2 stolen Imperial transports carrying ground troops. And standing beside Hera in the makeshift command center, a figure that made even hardened rebel veterans nervous: Ahsoka Tano. The former Jedi, now operating under the codename Fulcrum, had arrived with reinforcements after Kanan's desperate transmission. She stood studying holographic tactical displays, her white lightsabers hanging at her sides. Her Togruta mantrals marked with distinctive patterns that spoke of decades surviving impossible odds. "This is suicide," she said flatly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded armies during the Clone Wars. "Frieza's power exceeds anything in our combat database. He destroyed 3,000 civilians with a single attack. Our forces are insufficient." "Then why did you come?" Ezra asked, the edge in his voice sharper than it had been before Tarkintown. Something had broken in him during those 3 days, replaced by a cold determination that worried Kanan deeply. "Because someone needs to witness," Ahsoka replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "If we all die here, the rebellion needs to know what killed us, what the Empire is willing to employ." She turned back to the tactical display. "But I'd prefer we survive to deliver that intelligence personally." "The plan gives us a chance," Hera insisted, highlighting approach vectors on the hologram. "Frieza is powerful, but he's arrogant. He operates alone, trusts in his personal abilities rather than supporting infrastructure. If we can separate him from Imperial reinforcements and hit him with concentrated firepower, he'll swat our fighters from the sky like insects." Sabine interrupted. "I've analyzed the Factory 7 footage. He moves faster than our targeting computers can track. Our weapons can't penetrate his defenses." "Lightsabers can," Kanan said quietly. "I cut him. Not deeply, but I drew blood. If we can overwhelm his defenses with sustained force attacks while your fighters provide suppression fire—" "That's not a plan," Ahsoka said. That's hope dressed up in tactical language. It's what we have, Kanan replied. Unless you have better ideas? Before Ahsoka could respond, alarms screamed across the command center. A sensor tech looked up, face pale. Imperial Star Destroyer just entered orbit. It's, it's the Executor class, Vader's flagship. The command center fell silent. Vader, Darth Vader, the Emperor's executioner, the Jedi killer who'd survived Order 66 and become the Empire's most feared enforcer. And he was here, on Lothal, drawn to the same conflict that had gathered rebel forces. This changes everything, Ahsoka whispered, her hands moving unconsciously to her lightsabers. She'd fought alongside Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, trained under him, considered him a brother. The knowledge of what he'd become, what Vader truly was, still haunted her. Ezra felt it through the Force, two voids converging on Lothal, two impossible powers gathering in the same space. Frieza's blank absence and Vader's suffocating darkness, about to collide with rebel forces trapped between them. "We proceed," he said, his voice carrying unnatural calm. "If we run now, Lothal suffers more massacres. At least if we fight, we force them to focus on us instead of civilians." "Ezra's right," Hera said, though the words clearly cost her. "We commit, full assault on Imperial headquarters, draw both Frieza and Vader into engagement, and pray the Force is with us." Ahsoka studied the young Padawan, seeing something in his eyes that reminded her painfully of Anakin. That same determination that could become either heroism or catastrophe, depending on which path fate chose. "Then we fight," she said. "But we fight smart. Kanan, you and I engage Vader if he appears. Our experience with Sith might give us a chance. Ezra, you're staying with—" "I'm fighting Frieza," Ezra interrupted. "He wants me specifically. Let's use that." "Absolutely not. He won't kill me," Ezra continued, his tactical reasoning sound even if his motivations were questionable. "The Emperor wants me alive. That gives me an advantage none of you have. I can take risks because he has to hold back. You don't have that protection." Kanan wanted to argue, wanted to pull rank as Ezra's master and forbid this suicidal plan. But looking at his apprentice, he recognized the expression, the same one he'd worn after Order 66, when survival meant making impossible choices. "Stay alive," and Kanan said simply. "That's an order." Ezra nodded, though they both knew it was a promise neither could guarantee. Frieza stood on the Imperial headquarters observation deck, watching Lothal's twin suns set over the scarred landscape. The Tarkin Town crater was visible even from this distance, a dark circle against the grasslands, a monument to his efficiency. He sensed the ship before sensors detected it, that familiar suffocating presence he'd felt once before on Mustafar. Vader, the Emperor's damaged enforcer, arriving to either assist or complicate the situation. "Interesting," Frieza murmured. "I wonder if he's here to help or to settle our unfinished business." Governor Price entered the observation deck, her expression carefully neutral. "Lord Vader has requested immediate audience with you. He's insistent." "Of course he is." Frieza turned from the viewport, his tail swishing with anticipation. "By all means, send him up. This should be enlightening." Minutes later, the observation deck's doors hissed open, and Darth Vader strode through like a walking storm. His armor had been repaired since Mustafar. New chest plate, reinforced joints, upgraded respiratory systems. He learned from their first encounter, adapted his equipment to better handle opponents who exceeded normal threat parameters. They faced each other across the observation deck, Predator evaluating Predator. "Lord Frieza," Vader's mechanical voice rumbled, "the Emperor has sent me to ensure the rebel threat is eliminated completely." "How thoughtful," Frieza replied. "And here I thought you'd come seeking a rematch after our dance on Mustafar. I'm almost disappointed." "Our previous encounter was educational," Vader admitted. "You are powerful, more than I initially assessed. But power without discipline is merely destruction. And discipline without power is merely performance," Frieza countered. "Tell me, Lord Vader, are you here to help or hinder? Because I've found that partnerships work best when objectives align clearly." Before Vader could respond, alarms shrieked throughout the headquarters. A communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. Rebel attack! Multiple fighters inbound from the grasslands. Ground forces advancing on the perimeter. Frieza and Vader exchanged glances, or would have if Vader's mask permitted such things. They're attacking, Frieza said with genuine delight. How wonderfully stupid. The idealists couldn't help themselves after all. Then we will destroy them together, Vader stated. The Emperor wants the boy Bridger alive. All others are expendable. Agreed. Frieza moved toward the observation deck's viewport as explosions began blooming across the headquarters' outer defenses. Though I do hope they brought their Jedi, I'm eager to test myself against properly trained Force users. Be careful what you wish for, Vader warned, his lightsaber already in hand. The Force can destroy beings more powerful than you imagine. Frieza's laugh echoed across the observation deck. Lord Vader, I am more powerful than you can imagine. Now let's teach these rebels why challenging us was their final mistake. They descended together, Sith Lord and intergalactic tyrant, darkness and void converging, toward a battle that would determine Lothal's fate and test whether raw power could truly overcome mystical destiny. The rebel assault hit Imperial headquarters like a storm. Y-wing bombers strafed defensive turrets, their ion cannons disabling shield generators. A-wings flew escort, their speed and maneuverability overwhelming the scrambled TIE fighter response. Ground troops, rebel soldiers augmented by local militia who'd lost family in Tarkintown, stormed the perimeter, their fury overcoming their inadequate equipment. It was chaos, desperate, and beautiful, the kind of operation that only worked because everyone involved had accepted they were probably going to die. In the Ghost, Hera coordinated the assault with ruthless efficiency, her Twi'lek instincts processing tactical data faster than most computers. Sabine manned the weapons, her Mandalorian training letting her thread shots through friendly fire with impossible precision. Zeb handled boarding operations, his Lasat strength letting him physically tear through sealed bulkheads. And Kanan stood at the boarding ramp, lightsaber ignited, reaching through the Force for the darkness he knew was coming. He felt Vader before he saw him, that suffocating presence that had haunted his nightmares since Order 66, the embodiment of everything the Jedi Order had failed to prevent. The Dark Lord emerged from the headquarters like death incarnate, red lightsaber blazing, Force power radiating outward in waves that made even experienced rebel soldiers stumble. I know you, Vader stated, his vocabulary turning words into mechanical menace. You survived the purge. You've hidden well, Jedi, but your cowardice ends here. Kanan didn't respond with words. His green blade met Vader's red, and the battle was joined. Form 3 against Form 5. Soresu's perfect defense against Jem So's overwhelming offense. Survivor against Executioner. They fought across the headquarters courtyard, lightsabers creating light shows of survival and death. Kanan gave ground continuously, his defensive style designed for exactly this. Survive the superior opponent, wait for mistakes, exploit openings that might never come. Then white light blazed, and Ahsoka entered the fight. Her dual lightsabers, both white, purified from crystals taken from Inquisitors she defeated, moved in patterns Vader recognized immediately. Jarkai, the two-blade form he'd seen her develop during the Clone Wars, when she'd been Anakin's Padawan and he'd been her master. Ahsoka, Vader said, and something in his mechanical voice approached emotion. The Emperor promised you were dead. The Emperor lies, Ahsoka replied, her voice steady despite the grief threatening to overwhelm her. You taught me that, Anakin, before you fell. Anakin Skywalker is dead, Vader declared, and attacked with renewed fury. The battle escalated. 3 lightsabers against 1. 2 skilled Jedi against the galaxy's most feared Sith. Desperation against dark perfection. Around them, the larger battle raged. Rebel fighters dueling TIE interceptors, ground troops breaching headquarters defenses, explosions painting the Lothal sky in fire and chaos. And through it all, Ezra ran. He sprinted through the headquarters corridors, following his Force senses toward the one presence that registered as absence. Frieza, the being who'd murdered 3,000 innocents. The creature who represented everything wrong with the Empire's new willingness to employ monsters. He found Frieza in the throne room, the same chamber where Governor Price normally held court, now appropriated by the alien tyrant who lounged in the governor's chair like a king surveying his domain. "Ah, young Ezra Bridger," Frieza said pleasantly as the Padawan burst through the doors. "I was hoping you'd come. Running away to watch your friends die from safety would have been so disappointing." Ezra ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade humming with barely contained energy. "I'm not here to talk." "Obviously." Frieza stood, his movements fluid and unhurried. "You're here for revenge, for justice, for all those noble motivations that make young Force sensitives so predictably emotional." He began walking down from the throne's dais. "The Emperor wants you alive, you know. He sees potential in you, the same potential he saw in Vader before that one's unfortunate disfigurement." "I'll never join the Empire," Ezra snarled, channeling the Force through his legs and launching himself at Frieza with enhanced speed. His lightsaber struck Frieza's raised hand and stopped. Not caught between fingers this time, but blocked by a sphere of purple energy that Frieza had manifested as a shield. The lightsaber blade screamed against the key barrier, energy crackling and sparking, but couldn't penetrate. "I've adapted," Frieza explained conversationally. "Your Jedi friend taught me that lightsabers can cut me if I'm careless. So I've learned to project defensive fields specifically calibrated to their frequency. Thank you for the motivation to improve." He released the barrier suddenly and Ezra stumbled forward. Frieza's tail whipped around, catching the Padawan across the chest and sending him flying into a wall. Ezra hit hard enough to crack the durasteel, his vision swimming, ribs screaming pain. "The Emperor wants you alive," Frieza continued, approaching slowly. "But he didn't specify uninjured. I can break most of your bones and still deliver you breathing. Shall we establish exactly how much pain you can endure before surrendering?" Ezra reached through the Force desperately, pulling on reserves of power he'd never fully tapped. The throne room's furniture began to levitate. Chairs, tables, decorative statues, everything not bolted down. He hurled it all at Frieza in a telekinetic barrage enhanced by rage and desperation. Frieza's own telekinetic power activated, catching every object mid-flight. For a moment, they stood deadlocked. Force versus Ki, mystical energy against biological power, each trying to overcome the other's control. Then Frieza pushed, and his superior raw strength overwhelmed Ezra's technique. The furniture flew backward, slamming into the Padawan like a tsunami of debris. Ezra disappeared under an avalanche of durasteel and metal, buried in wreckage. "Disappointing," Frieza sighed. "I expected more from someone the Emperor considers valuable." The wreckage exploded outward. Ezra stood at the center, and something had changed. His eyes blazed with power. Not just anger now, but something darker, colder. The Force around him had taken on a different quality, tinged with shadows that Kanan would have recognized immediately as dark side corruption, accelerated by trauma and rage. "I'm done holding back," Ezra said, his voice carrying unnatural resonance. "If I have to touch the darkness to beat you, then that's what I'll do." Frieza's expression shifted from boredom to genuine interest. "Now this is more like it. Show me, boy. Show me what your Force can do when properly motivated by hatred." They clashed again, but this time Ezra fought differently. More aggressive, more brutal, channeling dark side energy through his lightsaber techniques with abandon. His strikes carried Force-enhanced power that actually made Frieza work to block them. His movements were faster, less controlled, but more dangerous. The fighting style of someone who'd accepted that survival might require damnation. Outside, the battle reached its crescendo. Rebel fighters fell in flames. Imperial walkers stomped toward breached defenses. Ahsoka and Kanan fought Vader with everything they had, their combined skill barely matching his power. And in the throne room, Padawan and Tyrant fought a battle that would decide not just survival, but the very nature of who Ezra Bridger would become. Whether he'd emerge from this crucible as a hero who'd touched darkness and returned, or as another victim of the Sith's most insidious corruption. The Force swirled around them both, light and dark intertwining, destiny hanging in balance, as uncertain as it had been in generations. The battle for Lothal ended not with triumph, but with survival. Ezra Bridger, consumed by dark-side rage and desperation, pushed Frieza harder than any opponent since the Tyrant's arrival in the galaxy. His lightsaber, channeling hatred and grief, scored shallow cuts across Frieza's bioarmor, wounds that healed within seconds but proved the boy's potential. For 3 brutal minutes, Ezra fought like a demon, his connection to the Force amplified by emotions that would have terrified his master. But potential wasn't power. Rage wasn't discipline, and Frieza had fought gods. The end came when Frieza stopped playing. One moment, Ezra was pressing his attack, dark side energy crackling around him like lightning. The next, Frieza's tail had wrapped around his throat, lifting him off his feet with crushing force, his lightsaber clattering uselessly to the floor. "Impressive," Frieza said, studying the struggling Padawan with genuine respect. "You touched the darkness and channeled it effectively. With proper training, you could become quite formidable." His grip tightened, and Ezra's vision began to darken. "But the Emperor wants you alive, and I've grown bored of this demonstration. Sleep now, boy. When you wake, your true education begins." He pressed a pressure point in Ezra's neck, a technique learned from killing thousands of species across Universe 7. And the Padawan went limp, unconscious but breathing. Outside, Kanan felt it through the Force, his apprentice's presence dimming, falling into darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The distraction lasted only a second, but against Darth Vader, a second was eternity. Vader's lightsaber swept through Kanan's guard, the red blade carving a burning line across the Jedi's shoulder. Kanan stumbled, his green lightsaber falling from nerveless fingers. The wound cauterized instantly, but the damage catastrophic. "No!" Ahsoka threw herself between Vader and Kanan, her white blades crossed in desperate defense. "Fall back! All units, retreat!" The rebel forces, bloodied and broken, began their withdrawal. Hera brought the Ghost screaming down through defensive fire, its boarding ramp extended, Sabine and Zeb providing covering fire with everything the ship had. Rebel soldiers scrambled aboard transports, leaving behind too many dead, carrying too many wounded. Ahsoka dragged Kanan toward the Ghost, her blades deflecting blaster fire and the occasional force attack from Vader, who pursued with mechanical inevitability. They reached the ship's ramp just as Frieza emerged from the headquarters, carrying Ezra's unconscious form like a trophy. "Leaving so soon?" Frieza called out, his voice carrying over the battle's chaos. "And without your young Padawan? How disappointing." Ahsoka felt the impossible choice crystallize: stay and die trying to rescue Ezra, or retreat and live to fight another day. Every instinct screamed to fight, to never abandon a comrade. But looking at Kanan's wound, at the gathered Imperial forces, at Vader and Frieza standing together like twin manifestations of unstoppable power, she made the only choice that gave them any future at all. "We'll come back for him," she promised, though the words tasted like ash. "We'll come back." The Ghost's engines roared, lifting off through a hail of fire. TIE fighters pursued, but Hera's piloting was born of desperation and skill, refined through 100 impossible escapes. They broke atmosphere with half their systems damaged, hull breached in 3 places, carrying survivors who'd lost friends and hope in equal measure. Behind them, Lothal burned. In the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine received 3 visitors in his throne room: Governor Price via hologram, Lord Vader in person, and Lord Frieza fresh from his victory, carrying the unconscious Ezra Bridger. "The boy," Palpatine rasped, his yellow eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You've delivered him intact." "As requested," Frieza replied, depositing Ezra at the throne's base like an offering. "Though I must warn you, Emperor, he touched the dark side during our battle, channeled it quite effectively for someone so young and untrained. He has considerable potential, but also considerable danger if not properly controlled." "All power is dangerous," Palpatine said, studying the unconscious Padawan. "That's what makes it valuable. Lord Vader, take the boy to the detention level. I will personally oversee his education." Vader lifted Ezra with the Force, the body floating beside him as he exited the throne room. The Dark Lord's thoughts were carefully shielded, but Palpatine sensed the turmoil beneath. Vader had wanted to kill the Jedi, to complete his hunt, but had been denied by Frieza's interference in the rebels' escape. Good. Let his apprentice stew in frustration. It would fuel his power. "Lord Frieza," Palpatine continued once they were alone, You have proven your value beyond my initial expectations. The criminal networks now operate under your control. Lothal's rebellion has been broken, and you've delivered the boy I sought. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. I believe our partnership should be formalized, extended beyond single contracts. Frieza's smile was all teeth and calculated ambition. I'm listening. You will continue managing the criminal underworld, but with expanded authority. Outer rim territories that prove problematic can be placed under your direct control. You will serve as my enforcer for situations where Imperial military presence is counterproductive. In exchange, you receive resources, territory, and freedom to operate your organization without interference. And when our interests conflict, Frieza asked directly, I'm building an empire within your empire, Emperor. Eventually, that creates natural tension. Then we will resolve conflicts as equals, Palpatine replied, and both beings understood the lie. They would resolve conflicts through power, and only one of them would survive. For now, our interests align. The rebellion grows bolder. Threats emerge that conventional forces cannot handle. You are a weapon I find increasingly valuable. How flattering, Frieza purred. Very well, Emperor. I accept your expanded partnership. My organization will serve Imperial interests, for as long as those interests align with profit and power. His expression turned calculating. Though I do wonder, this force of yours. I've fought force users now, studied them, and I'm beginning to understand its principles. What happens when I fully adapt to this galaxy's energy signature? When I can manipulate the force myself? Palpatine's smile was thin and dangerous. Then we will discover whether destiny or raw power truly rules this galaxy. I look forward to that test, Lord Frieza. They understood each other perfectly. Temporary allies bound by mutual utility, destined eventually to become enemies, each confident in their own superiority. The galaxy's future hung between them, balanced on a knife's edge of ambition and power. Weeks later, in a hidden rebel base far from Lothal, the Ghost crew mourned their losses and planned their next moves. Kanan's shoulder was healing slowly, the lightsaber wound leaving scars both physical and spiritual. Ahsoka had departed to rally larger rebel forces, carrying intelligence about Frieza that painted a terrifying picture of the Empire's willingness to employ extragalactic powers. And in the Ghost Common area, Hera, Sabine, Zeb, and Kanan gathered around a holographic projection of Ezra's last known location, the Imperial Palace on Coruscant. We'll get him back, Hera said firmly, the declaration becoming a vow. No matter how long it takes, no matter what we have to do, we don't leave family behind. He touched the dark side, Kanan said quietly, the truth hanging heavy between them. I felt it through the Force. The Emperor will use that, corrupt him further, try to turn him into another Inquisitor or worse. Then we rescue him before that happens, Sabine replied, her Mandalorian certainty cutting through despair. We've beaten impossible odds before. We've never faced odds like this, Zeb rumbled, but his grip on his bow rifle was determined. But we're going to try anyway, because that's what we do. They stood together, broken but undefeated, planning an impossible rescue against an empire that had just acquired its most dangerous enforcer. The fight ahead would test them beyond anything they'd faced, against Vader's darkness, against Palpatine's manipulation, against Frieza's godlike power. But they were rebels, and rebels never surrendered hope, even when hope seemed like madness. In the Imperial Palace's detention cells, Ezra Bridger woke to find Emperor Palpatine standing outside his ray-shielded prison, those terrible yellow eyes studying him like a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. Welcome to your new life, young Bridger, the Emperor rasped. You touched the dark side to fight Lord Frieza. You felt its power, its freedom from the Jedi's limiting dogma. Now you will learn to embrace it fully, to become what you were always meant to be. Ezra wanted to refuse, to declare his loyalty to the light, to remain true to Kanan's teachings. But the memory of fighting Frieza haunted him, how the dark side had made him stronger, faster, more dangerous. How it had nearly been enough. Nearly. What do you want from me? He asked, hating how his voice shook. Palpatine's smile was terrible and patient. Everything, my young apprentice. Everything. And across the galaxy, on a dozen worlds in the Outer Rim, Frieza's criminal empire expanded with brutal efficiency. Planets that resisted found themselves facing demonstrations similar to Tarkentown. Those that cooperated discovered that serving the Galactic Trade Collective was more profitable than fighting it. Frieza established his primary headquarters on Tatooine, transforming Jabba's palace into a fortress worthy of an emperor. His forces, a mix of hired bounty hunters, converted criminal organizations, and eventually soldiers from his original universe as he learned to create dimensional rifts, became the Empire's unofficial enforcers for the dirtiest work. The galaxy learned a new truth. The Empire had always been terrifying, but now it employed a being who made stormtroopers look merciful by comparison. In his private chambers, Frieza meditated on power and possibility. This galaxy offered opportunities his original universe had long exhausted. New species to subjugate, new technologies to acquire, and most intriguingly, this force energy that he was slowly, methodically learning to manipulate. His Ki control had fully adapted now, operating at 100% efficiency. Soon he would attempt what no being from his universe had ever managed. He would touch the Force itself, merge his natural power with this galaxy's mystical energy, and become something unprecedented. Either he would succeed and transcend both systems of power, or the attempt would destroy him. Frieza had built an empire on risk. This was simply the largest gamble he'd ever made. The cold empire was rising. The galaxy trembled before its frost-white emperor. And somewhere in the distance, destiny and power prepared for their inevitable collision. A confrontation that would determine whether raw strength could truly overcome mystical fate, or whether even gods from other universes must eventually bow before the Force's inexorable will. The answer remained unwritten, waiting for the day when Frieza finally mastered the Force, when Ezra chose between light and dark, when the rebellion grew strong enough to challenge both Empire and Enforcer. That day was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same.